Chapter 1335. One punch. It almost killed the Fire Demon Patriarch. That was Fire Demon Patriarch, one of the 9 strongest experts in Nether Prison, the 9 Revolution Great Sage, whose cultivation base was mighty and whose name shook the world. But in a flash, he couldn't even dodge, and he was almost killed. The monstrous flames around him were dim, and he was almost knocked out of the battlefield of the stars. It was really terrifying. Yinglong and the others all held their breaths. Not only him, but the great sage who fought Yinglong also gasped when they saw the terrifying strength of the great sage Acheron. Is this the great sage of Earth Prison? Why is he so terrifying? Does losing hair increase his strength? Is the baldy stronger? Are all the monks in the West Little Buddhism realm going to ascend to the heavens? A loud rumble rang out. It was like a comet sweeping across the sky. The fire demon ancestor, who was blasted away, shot out and slammed into a meteor that was flying by. The impact caused a huge pit to appear on the meteor, and it almost pierced through the meteor. Whoosh! Fire demon Patriarch's eyes widened as he crawled out of the pit. His chest was deeply sunken, and there seemed to be magma-like mucus flowing in it. That was his blood. It had been many years since he was stabbed by the halberd when he attacked Hades Tenzang. Since then, he had never bled again. But now, his body was blown up by the great sage Acheron's punch. You're courting death. Fire Demon Patriarch's eyes turned completely cold, and his killing intent towered into the sky. In the distance, Beastmaster Patriarch was already taken aback. The strength that erupted from the great sage Acheron shocked him. The oppressive aura pressed against his chest like a boulder, making him not dare to breathe loudly. He didn't quite understand why the great sage Acheron's cultivation base had become so strong. Do you know why I'm so strong? It was all because of you. The great sage Acheron's eyes turned gloomy as he hovered in the void. He raised his hand and touched his bald head. For a moment, his heart was filled with grief. 3,000 strands of worry falling off in one day, what a heartbreaking thing. The great sage Acheron let out a long sigh. In this situation, only violence could express the anger in his heart. Boom! The great sage Acheron said. His figure instantly flew across the void like a phantom. The forefather of Beastamers narrowed his eyes. His figure burst forth. However, just as he moved, the face of the great sage Acheron appeared in front of him. The old Beastmaster ancestor was frightened out of his wits. How could he possibly block such a speed? Dying. The Beastmaster ancestor was so anxious. He waved his sleeve, and a black shadow shot toward the great sage Acheron. It was a long, pitch-black snake with shining scales and a pitch-black forked tongue. At first glance, one could tell that it was extremely venomous. As soon as the snake shot out and bit him, even the great sage would suffer. However, there was a cracking sound. The snake's head was pinched. The great sage Acheron's bald head shone as if it was reflecting the starlight under the starry sky. His thumb and index finger pinched, and with a sudden force, the head of the snake was crushed by the great sage Acheron. You little snake, you open your mouth so wide. Are you laughing at me? The great sage Acheron said coldly, his face expressionless. The beast tamer ancestor's heart ached when he saw his snake's head crushed. That was a rare species, and it was the only venomous snake in the entire netherworld. Boom! However, before he could recover from his heartache, a punch suddenly enlarged in front of his eyes. It hit him in the chest. The beast tamer ancestor's eyes widened, and everything seemed to stand still at this moment. His body bent over, and he coughed out blood from his mouth. It was a loud bang. His body flew backward, and with a sonic boom, he smashed hard into a meteorite. After sending 2 9 Revolution Great Sage flying with 2 punches, the Great Sage Acheron touched his bald head. His eyes were sad. Swoosh beneath the battlefield of the stars, in the clouds that filled the sky. The sound of something piercing through the air rang out. One figure after another emerged from the clouds. Ice Saint's long hair fluttered in the wind, and her white veil fluttered making her look like a peerless immortal. Stepping on a silver sword, the sword demon patriarch rushed into the battlefield of the stars. Horned demon patriarch and the other great sages followed him. From a distance, they saw the great sage Acheron standing in the starry sky. His terrible aura spread as if to intimidate everyone. The sword demon patriarch's pupils constricted, and he felt a little incredulous. How could the great sage Acheron's cultivation base be so strong? He felt as if he had broken through the shackles and reached a higher realm. Could he be the great sage of the perfected realm? That was a realm that only Di Ting had reached. A little surprise came over Ice Saint's beautiful face. Looking at the bald Acheron, she blinked. "Yo, little sister, you're here." When the great sage Acheron saw Ice Saint, he grinned. Ice Saint's face returned to its cold expression. She glanced at the great sage Acheron, then at the fire demon patriarch and the beast tamer patriarch, who had been beaten deep into the meteorite. "Great sage Acheron, although you are the great sage of Earth Prison, you have always been detached from the world. Why are you involved in this matter? It won't do you any good." The sword demon patriarch stood on a sword and fixed his eyes on the great sage Acheron. In the past, he would not have cared about Acheron, because although he was also a 9 revolution great sage, he was only on par with him. But now, the bald great sage Acheron's strength was beyond his imagination. In fact, he was even stronger than Di Ting. If he could fool such an opponent, he should do so as soon as possible. "Since I've promised to help, I have to help," said the great sage Acheron. He raised the unfinished fortune flatbread in his hand and took another bite. Ice Saint immediately saw the familiar flatbread. Wasn't it the warm fortune flatbread that Bu Fong gave her? "Bu Fong, my little friend, also gave you a flatbread. Eat it, big sister. Eat it quickly. You'll be invincible once you eat it," great sage Acheron said. The corner of Ice Saint's mouth twitched. She looked at great sage Acheron's shiny bald head, then at the fortune flatbread in her hand. For a moment, she found it hard to accept. "No, I won't eat it," Ice Saint waved her hand. She was glad that she was almost fooled by Bu Fong. Fortunately, she had come up to take a look. Otherwise, if she ate the flatbread and became bald, who would she talk to? Ice Saint refused. Great sage Acheron, on the other hand, felt a little regretful. When Ice Saint saw his regretful expression, she felt that the old man was up to no good. He actually wanted her, who was so beautiful, to become bald as well. What a sinister man. Boom, boom. Fire demon patriarch and beastmaster patriarch soared into the sky again. The 6 patriarchs surrounded great sage Acheron and Ice Saint in midair. Their terrible killing intent almost merged together, causing a storm to sweep across the battlefield of the stars. In the distance, Earth Prison Overlord Long and the others had already stopped fighting. They were watching the peerless battle between the 9 revolution great saints with horror in their hearts. 6 great sage were besieging 2 great sage. The scene was simply shocking. A fierce battle broke out in an instant. Fire Demon Patriarch and Beastmaster Patriarch charged crazily toward Great Sage Acheron. Sword Demon Patriarch and Shadow Demon Patriarch joined the battle as well. The 4 great sages were fighting the bald Acheron. A rumbling sound exploded in the void. Horn Demon Patriarch and Nether Chef Patriarch were fighting Ice Saint. Terrible forces boiled and swept across the battlefield of the stars, stirring up the void and making it rumble. Terrible auras swept out, shattering meteorites and stirring up turbulence in the starry sky. In front of imprisoned Dragon Pass, when a few great sages entered the battlefield of the stars, many Earth Prison experts breathed a sigh of relief. Meanwhile, Bu Fong had finished cooking the fortune flatbreads. A few baskets of flatbreads were placed on the wall. Steaming hot steam rose into the sky. Flatbreads! Flatbreads! Bu Fong couldn't help but shout as he looked at the Earth Prison army that was constantly being suppressed down below. His voice wasn't loud, but it rang through the whole wall. The hearts of the Earth Prison experts flickered. Some experts rushed over and paid for the flatbreads without saying a word. After buying and eating the flatbreads, they still had to join the battle, so they had no time to chat with Buffon. The experts who had bought the flatbreads returned to the battlefield to block the enemies for their comrades. They grabbed the flatbreads and took a bite. A crunching sound rang throughout the battlefield. "Brother, I'll block them for you. Go to Ownerboo and buy flatbreads. After that, we'll travel the world with them." The experts who had bought the flatbreads blocked the attack for those who had no flatbreads, said with a deep face. Similar scenes kept happening on the battlefield. As the experts who had bought the flatbreads rushed into the battlefield, the situation was reversed again. The Nether Prison Army was forced to retreat. Hell's experts' morale skyrocketed at the sight of this. Luo Ji laughed excitedly. Her pink hair seemed to be trembling. "Dong! Dong! Dong!" She waved her long sleeves and beat the drums, producing a deafening sound that seemed to boil the blood in people's bodies. Yuji's face lit up as she watched the scene excitedly. She pulled out the hefty sword from her back, took out the fortune flatbreads, and took a bite. As soon as the crispy flatbreads were bitten, the fortune energy inside immediately poured into them. Yuji's eyes lit up. The next moment, she grabbed the overbearing hefty sword and threw it into the distance. The Overlord hefty sword was like a meteorite that rapidly smashed into the battlefield, cleaving an expert in half. Boom! Yuji stood on the wall, her eyes bright. She waved one of her hands. The overbearing hefty sword kept shuttling through the battlefield. A mouthful of fortune energy had given her a top-grade fortune, the sword controlling technique. More importantly, it was not an ordinary sword. She could even control the overbearing hefty sword, which weighed more than 10,000 kilograms. It was a frightening scene. The overbearing hefty sword shuttled through the crowd like a savage beast, constantly spewing out clouds of blood mist. It changed the situation of the battlefield. The Nether Prison Army howled and retreated. Every single one of them was incomparably dumbfounded. They had never thought that they would actually be defeated. They were not defeated by the Earth Prison Army, but by a piece of flatbreads. Damn it! In the Nether Prison battleships in the sky, an expert let out a roar. Rumble! On the warship, there was a mysterious energy gathering there. Then, a beam of energy shot toward the wall of imprisoned Dragon Pass. It was going to kill all the experts on the wall. It was the energy beam of the warship, and its power was comparable to the Great Sage's attack. Hades' Era was very curious about Bufong's flatbreads at the moment. Without a doubt, it must have been made by that young Bufong when they entered the Black Temple. He couldn't believe that he had missed such an interesting thing. He felt very sorry. Fortunately, he could still buy it now. He took the fortune flatbreads that Bufong threw over. Holding the steaming flatbreads in his hand, he felt as if they were warm. It was very magical. He bit into it, and it was crunchy. As soon as he bit into the crispy skin, Hades' Era's eyes lit up. The tender meat was even more delicious. However, the wisp of fortune energy that went into his mouth made Hades' Era's eyes go wide. The fortune of the fortune flatbreads? Hades' Era sucked in a cold breath. The next moment, he blinked and found that nothing had changed in his body. Where's the fortune I promised? Hades' Era was dumbfounded. Could it be that Ai's luck is so good that even the fortune energy can't change it? Hades' Era stroked his chin and pondered for a while. On the wall, the few heads of the aristocratic families closest to Hades' Era felt their legs go weak, and they looked at Hades' Era, trembling. Their eyes were full of fear, and after that, they became completely fanatical. They raised their hands, trembling so much that they couldn't even speak. Ming, Ming Ming, Your Excellency Hades. The few aristocratic families knelt on the ground, their heads touching the ground, trembling. Hey, I'm here. You don't have to bow to me. Hades' Era was a little confused. Then his eyes lit up. Could it be that the fortune he had obtained was the legendary overbearing aura that could make all the heavens submit to him? Indeed, this kind of fortune was in line with his identity as Hades. Bufong gave Hades' Era a strange look. You had already raised her hand to cover her mouth, her eyes filled with disbelief. It was the first time she had been so shocked. Yuji shivered. and her sword-controlling technique became stiff. She looked behind Hades' era in fear. There, a burly figure emerged. That burly figure was a little vague, but just by standing there, it made people's hearts tremble. It was not because of anything else. It was because of that figure's identity, Hades Tenzang. Hades' era finally came to his senses. These fellows were not afraid of him. He slowly turned his head and looked behind him. His neck stiffened. His fortune wasn't heaven-defying. It was terrifying. His fortune could even summon his dead father? Hades Tenzang opened his eyes. Stars seemed to vanish in his eyes. His terrifying aura gradually filled the air, causing the world around him to shake and collapse. His indifferent eyes fell on Hades' era. That glance scared Hades' era so much that his legs went soft, and he almost fell on his butt. Dad, long time no see. What a coincidence. You also come out for some fresh air? Chapter 1336. Hades Tenzang, a mighty lord of Earth Prison, was so strong that even the great sage of the 9 Nether Prison clans feared him. He had even led an army of Earth Prison to attack Nether Prison, causing the experts there to panic. However, in the war, this supreme being was beaten by the great sage of the 9 Nether Prison clans, and he was assassinated by the Lord of the Black Temple, a forbidden land in Earth Prison. Under all kinds of methods, this powerhouse finally fell. However, no one had thought that this supreme expert, who had fallen for a long time, had already become a legendary figure. He had reappeared. His eyes, which seemed to be able to vanish the void and make time float, burst into a divine light that made everyone's breathing quicken. Hades Tenzang had reappeared. At this moment, Nether King Erha finally knew why the experts of those aristocratic families knelt in fear. It turned out that his father had reappeared. Is this the so-called fortune? I can't believe I actually summoned my dead father. The light around Hades Tenzang flickered. His body was somewhat illusory, and it was obviously not a real body. Although the fortune was strong, it was still very difficult to resurrect a dead man. Death and resurrection were things that involved the supreme laws of the universe. Although the fortune flatbread was awesome, it was still far from the level that involved the laws. Hades Tenzang's aura fluctuated. Perhaps the fortune of the fortune flatbread had only summoned Hades Tenzang to this world for a short time. In fact, because the fortune was so terrifying, Hades Tenzang had only been alive for less than an hour. So, this is Hades Tenzang. Bufong looked at the expert with a magnificent figure, who seemed to be a supreme being with a peerless bearing, and a little surprise came into his eyes. His aura was indeed majestic, and his eyes seemed to contain heaven and earth. He did indeed have the posture and aura of a supreme expert. Hades' era's luck was actually able to summon such an existence. His luck was truly heaven-defying. Perhaps he was the real heaven's chosen one. In response to Hades' era's mischievous words, Hades Tenzang's gaze swept over him faintly. His mind shook, and he understood what had happened. Interesting. It can actually summon me back from the primal chaos. Hades Tenzang's gaze darkened. He raised his hand and patted Hades' era's head. I left the Ghost King past to you, yet you are still only a second transition great sage. It seems that after I left, you did not cultivate properly. Hades Tenzang glanced at Hades' era and said faintly. Hades' era smiled awkwardly. Although the pressure from Tian Song made him feel a little pressured, this familiar pressure made him sigh with emotion. That's because I'm immersed in the grief of your passing. Grief needs time to dissolve. Hades' era grinned. In response, the corners of Hades Tenzang's mouth rose, revealing a faint smile. Naughty. After so many years, your character hasn't changed. Hades Tenzang smiled, shaking his head. His body was surrounded by rolling black energy. His eyes swept over. His gaze swept over Bufong, pausing on Bufong for a few seconds. Then it fell on you. Little girl, come here. Let me have a good look at you. When Hades Tenzang saw you, his eyes were a little complicated. After all, he was the one who had exiled you. He felt a little guilty for what he had done to her. You pursed her lips, and the look in her eyes was very complicated. She trotted over to Hades Tenzang. Tian Song raised his hand, rubbed Yu's head, and sighed softly. When he sensed Yu's cultivation base and the cursed power in Yu, his eyes narrowed. Good. I didn't expect that the cursed power could be turned into power by you. At that time, I tried everything I could, but I couldn't suppress the curse. I didn't expect that you could do this, little girl. Hades Tenzang sighed with emotion. The cursed power was turning into Yu's power. It was growing stronger and stronger. Welcome back, Your Excellency Hades. The aristocratic families kneeling on the ground shouted excitedly. They never thought that the peerless man would come back to life. The supreme existence who had led them to attack Nether Prison had returned when Earth Prison was besieged by Nether Prison. Hades Tenzang's eyes fell on them. Then his eyes turned and swept over the vast battlefield outside imprisoned Dragon Pass. He could feel the killing atmosphere blowing in his face. Hades Tenzang exhaled softly. Nether Prison has come to attack us. Hades Tenzang seemed to have expected all this. It is imperative to form a great world. There are many small worlds in the Netherworld, but there isn't a great world of its own. Once those powerful great worlds in the starry sky find out about it, I'm afraid the entire Netherworld will become their vassal and be shrouded in deep water and fire. Hades Tenzang said. He seemed to be murmuring to himself. The people around him were a little frightened when they heard that. Anyway, why should I care so much? I'm a dead man after all. Although I've come back, I won't exist for long. Hades Tenzang had a deep look in his eyes. He looked at the Nether Prison battleships in the sky, which kept shooting terrible destructive rays. Slowly, he took a step forward. Heaven and earth seemed to distort at this moment. Like a dazzling star, he stepped straight up in the sky, facing the rays. Boom, 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 boom. Several attacking rays that were comparable to the 7th or 8th revolution Great Sage suddenly smashed down. The skies seemed to be burned by the rays, twisting and cracking. These rays went straight to imprisoned Dragon Pass, wanting to destroy the entire pass. The terrible power shook heaven and earth. In the face of such power, many people in the imprisoned Dragon Pass trembled. But at this moment, they were fearless. Because Hades Tenzang was here. He was the god in the hearts of all the people in Earth Prison. Hades' era raised his head, his eyes shining. He didn't expect to see his father's awe-inspiring appearance again in this life. Compared to his father, he, the so-called Netherworld King, was really at the level of playing house. UG, and the heads of the aristocratic families all looked at the sky excitedly, only waiting for Hades Tenzang to show his peerless power again. Bu Fong clasped his hands, watching Hades Tenzang step by step, as if he was climbing an invisible ladder to the sky. The corners of his mouth couldn't help but twitch. The number one person in Earth Prison indeed deserved it. Boom! The rays smashed on Hades Tenzang's body. Suddenly, it exploded in the sky. Terrible flames swept across heaven and earth, covering the whole place, covering everyone's sight, making everyone suck in a breath of cold air. Such an explosion almost destroyed heaven and earth. In the Nether Prison battleship, the experts widened their eyes in disbelief. All of a sudden, the void twisted. As smoke and dust drifted, a figure emerged in the void again. That earth-shattering, terrifying ray didn't blow that expert to death. Hades Tenzang was burly, his face calm. Looking at the battleship in the sky, the corners of his mouth twitched. A bunch of clowns. A moment later, Hades Tenzang raised his hand. Slowly, he squeezed it. Between heaven and earth, countless energies gathered together. Crunch, crunch, a huge palm appeared in the sky, covering the sun. That palm wrapped the Nether Prison battleship. As he clenched his palms together, the warship gradually crumbled and exploded in the sky, turning into flames that filled the sky. Long before the explosion, the Nether Prison experts rushed out of the battleship. Several second and third revolution Nether Prison Great Sage were enraged to the extreme. Presumptuous. With a loud roar, the Nether Prison Great Sage walked over in the sky. His killing intent swept across heaven and earth, blasting toward the figure in the sky. Crossing the sky, he appeared in front of Hades Tenzang in a short while. However, Hades Tenzang just clasped his hands, raised his eyes, and glanced. That glance made the Nether Prison Great Sage tremble with fear. How is this possible? It's him. It's that terrible man. Hades Tenzang. Isn't he dead? The Nether Prison Great Sage was terrified. Looking at that man, they remembered a time when they were dominated by fear. He was a man like a demon king. Even Nether Puppeteer Patriarch doesn't dare to be presumptuous in front of me. How dare a few second and third revolution Nether Puppeteer Patriarch shout at me. Tian Song clasped his hands behind his back and looked at the few great saints. The next moment, with a thought, the black energy around his body condensed into spears. With a surge of his will, those spears immediately turned into streaks of light that soared into the sky and shot out. Run! Without hesitation, the Nether Prison Great Sage turned and tried to flee. In the face of Hades Tenzang, they had no courage to fight. Slash! One black spear after another pierced the Great Sage. The miserable howls of the Great Sage echoed between heaven and earth. The next moment, their bodies exploded with a bang. The Great Sage fell, turning into energy essence and streams of light that sprinkled between heaven and earth like a rain of essence. His back, which looked like a demon king, made him look like a heaven god. In the imprisoned dragon pass, everyone was stunned. Hades Era's blood was boiling. He clenched his fists, and his face was flushed with excitement. The prison overlords and the heads of the aristocratic families were also very excited. This was the former god of Earth Prison. Sure enough, he could shake heaven and earth. He looked down on the heavens. On the battlefield, at this moment, the Nether Prison army, which had been suppressed and forced to retreat, completely lost the will to fight. In an instant, they collapsed and fled out of the imprisoned dragon pass. The army was completely routed. Hades Tenzang glanced around and gave an evil smile. Then, he raised his head, his hair whipping the void as he looked up at the sky. That was the battlefield of the stars. Then, he slowly stepped onto it. He didn't have much time, and he had to solve the problems that needed to be solved. In the imprisoned dragon pass, Bu Fong looked at the cheering Earth Prison army on the battlefield. He couldn't help but touch his nose. He seemed to have won the battle a little too easily. Looking at the remaining steaming fortune flatbreads in the basket, he had no choice but to put it away. It seemed that he couldn't sell them now, but he could sell them slowly in the future. My father is going to the battlefield of the stars. Does anyone want to go and have a look? Hades Era was very excited. He shouted to the people around him. Bu Fong's heart skipped a beat. The battlefield of the stars? It was a place he had never been to. He heard that the Great Sage's experts fought there because the aftermath of the Great Sage's battle was too strong. He could go and have a look. He didn't know when you had come to his side and tugged at his sleeve. There was a look of eagerness in her eyes. Okay, I got it. Let's go together, Bu Fong said. Then you narrowed her eyes. At the little saint level, one could step into the starry sky for a short time. Most of the people present were 9 revolution little saints, so it was not difficult for them to enter the starry sky. Rumble. The netherworld ship bobbed up and down. Bu Fong sat cross-legged on the deck. UG, and Hades Era, who had shamelessly climbed onto the ship, were all there. The next moment, the netherworld ship soared into the sky. The experts of the aristocratic families naturally wouldn't miss the chance to admire Hades Tenzang's power. They all burst out their strength and rushed into the starry sky. Even so, it consumed a lot of their energy. In a starry sky, the sky was suddenly torn apart. Terrible air waves rumbled. After all, Ice Saint had just come out of the Forbidden Land, so her strength was greatly weakened. For a moment, she was at a disadvantage. But even so, she was still a peerless beauty. As she raised her hands and stomped her feet, ice crystals spread. Great Sage Acheron was very strong. He was bald, but he had also become stronger. He was fighting 5 enemies alone, and he was not at a disadvantage at all. The 5 Nether Prison Patriarchs were dumbfounded. Great Sage Acheron had become so strong after he was bald. They all hesitated, wondering if they should go back and shave their heads. In the past, Great Sage Acheron could only stop 2 Great Sage Patriarchs. Suddenly, Sword Demon Patriarch seemed to have sensed something. He jerked his head and looked down at the churning sea of clouds. His pupils constricted. In the sea of clouds, there was a figure slowly stepping on the air as he walked over. Boom! Great Sage Acheron knocked the 3 away with a punch. Rubbing his bald head, he felt as though steam was rising from his body. However, he seemed to have noticed something. He turned his head and saw a familiar figure. When he saw the figure, Great Sage Acheron's mouth went wide. He was even more surprised than when he was bald. In the distance, Ice Saint, who had knocked Horned Demon Patriarch away with an ice crystal sword, flicked her long eyelashes and jerked her head over her shoulder. Sword Demon Patriarch and the other patriarchs sucked in their breaths in disbelief. How could he still be alive? Hades Tenzang walked leisurely with his hands clasped behind his back. However, he was very fast. With every step he took, he traveled thousands of miles in a flash, as if the ground had shrunk to an inch. Before long, he came to the battlefield where the few great sage patriarchs were fighting. He was tall and sturdy, surrounded by a majestic black aura. He glanced at Sword Demon Patriarch and the others. Then, he gave Ice Saint a complicated look. Finally, he rested his eyes on Great Sage Acheron and said in a strange voice, "Well, I haven't seen you for many years." Ugh, it's been so many years. Yomi, when did you become bald? But you've become stronger even though you've become bald. Chapter 1337. Hades Tenzang. Everyone in the battlefield of the stars was dumbfounded. Looking at the man who was already dead, their faces were filled with shock and astonishment. Could the dead come back to life? Sword Demon Patriarch and the others were terrified. They couldn't believe that Hades Tenzang was here. They had seen with their own eyes how Hades Tenzang was killed. His body was torn into thousands of pieces and vanished into the void. However, the man in front of them had appeared again. "No, you didn't come back to life. You're just here with the help of some power." Sword Demon Patriarch was a clever man. When he saw Hades Tenzang's somewhat blurry body, he immediately figured it out. Such a heaven-defying act is against the heavenly path. Sword Demon Patriarch shouted coldly. They were truly frightened by Hades Tenzang. "Ha ha ha! The heavenly path? You're talking to me about the heavenly path? The heavenly path is nothing." Hades Tenzang laughed. Then he stepped across the air and landed next to Ice Saint. Horned Demon Patriarch's pupils constricted. "How dare you bully my woman? Do you have a death wish?" Hades Tenzang grinned coldly. The next moment, he raised his palm, and a terrible power overturned heaven and earth. The palm strike sent Horned Demon Patriarch flying backward, and he smashed heavily into a flying meteorite. Great Sage Acheron touched his bald head, a strange look in his eyes. Hades Tenzang is as strong as ever. Buzz in the distance, a small boat swayed as it sped over. It hovered in the distance of the battlefield of the stars. It watched from afar. Bufong and the others sat on the deck, watching the battle with wide eyes. Great Sage Acheron seemed to sense something. He turned his head and looked in the direction of Bufong and saw Bufong sitting on the deck. "Huh, how did Great Sage Acheron become bald?" Bufong said with slight surprise. "Yeah, Great Sage Acheron wasn't bald before. To be honest, a bald head is really ugly." Hades Era grinned. He seemed to be able to hear the conversation between Bufong and the others. The corner of the Great Sage Acheron's mouth twitched. His heart was filled with grief. Who could he blame for going bald? It was all because of the fortune flatbread, which had turned him bald, and he couldn't do anything to stop it. Fortunately, he was somewhat comforted by the fact that he had become stronger. Otherwise, if he ate a piece of cake and became bald, how aggrieved would that be? Ice Saint was still looking at Hades Tenzang with a complicated gaze. He could not help but sigh as he looked at the latter's somewhat illusory figure. He won't be able to exist in this world for long. It's impossible for a dead person to be resurrected. Let's attack together and obliterate him. Sword Demon Patriarch's pupils constricted as he said. An explosion rang out. In a meteorite, Horned Demon Patriarch's body suddenly grew larger, turning into a huge three-horned rhinoceros that blotted out the sky. His horn was shrouded in a cold light, and his huge body was like a towering mountain. Rumble! The rhinoceros charged forward with his horn, heading toward Hades Tenzang. The void seemed to be on the verge of shattering. Beast! Hades Tenzang's eyes suddenly turned sharp. A pitch-black energy swept out and covered his body, turning into the Hades armor. He raised his hand, and the Hades halberd appeared in his hand. Hades swung the halberd, smashing it hard on the head of the charging rhinoceros. It was as if a mountain had crumbled. The terrible explosion pushed the huge rhinoceros back a few steps. The rumbling sound shook the sky. The rhinoceros was furious. It continued to charge forward. Attack together. He is no longer as brave as he used to be. Sword Demon Patriarch's eyes lit up when he saw that Hades Tenzang had failed to seriously injure Horned Demon Patriarch. He bellowed. The next moment, all the great sage patriarchs attacked at the same time. Boom, boom, boom. Accompanied by a depressing roar, it charged towards them. Hey, do you think I don't exist? However, as soon as they moved, they were intercepted by a figure. It was none other than Great Sage Acheron. Great Sage Acheron had his back to Sword Demon Patriarch and the others. His head was turned 45 degrees to the side, and he looked very gloomy. His indifferent voice caused the expressions of the Sword Demon Patriarchs to flicker. Acheron, if you insist on getting involved in this, you will die a horrible death. Don't blame me for not warning you. A man like you who has lived for so long must be afraid of death. Since you are afraid of death, get out of here as far as you can. Sword Demon Patriarch said coldly. Buzz around his body, flying swords rose into the air, and within the sword light, there was an explosion of infinite power. Yes, a man who has lived for so long will be afraid of death. Great Sage Acheron said, stroking his bald head. But I hate it more when people threaten me than when I'm afraid of death. Great Sage Acheron grinned. The next moment, a jade jar suddenly appeared in his hand. Zhang Xin grabbed the green jade jar and opened its lid. A rich aroma of wine wafted out of it, and a colorful light filled the sky. Gulp! He carefully took a sip of the wine. Great Sage Acheron narrowed his eyes and smacked his lips. He looked like he was enjoying the wine very much. Just in case, I'd better take a sip of the wine first. Great Sage Acheron said, How dare you force me to drink my precious wine? None of you can escape. Great Sage Acheron carefully put away the jade jar. Then he clenched his fists. His bald head shone brightly in the starry sky as he charged toward the 5 patriarchs. They began to fight again. Rumbling sounds echoed through the heavens. In the distance, Hades' Era and the others were dumbfounded. Good heavens! When did Great Sage Acheron become so powerful? He's bald, but he's become stronger? Is there such a strange thing? Bufang had a strange look in his eyes as well. Is this the legendary Teacher Acheron? The fortune obtained by Great Sage Acheron is really different from the rest. Hades Tenzang held the Hades halberd. Although it was not the real Hades halberd, its power was still boundless. Every time it struck, the huge 3-horned rhinoceros would bleed profusely. Ice Saint hovered in the distance, her white dress fluttering in the wind. Looking at that majestic figure, she couldn't help but recall many things. That figure, who had slaughtered so many people, had the spirit to fight against 10,000 people alone. What a pity! He had fallen in the end. However, now that she could see him again, she felt a little melancholy. Boom! The huge 3-horned rhinoceros was struck down. The 3 horns on his head were ripped off, and blood gushed out like a fountain. Hades Tenzang didn't say anything to Ice Saint. He didn't even make eye contact. He just kept beating the 3-horned rhinoceros. It was as if he was venting all his emotions on it. His silence made Ice Saint's heart even more gloomy. She knew. Hades Tenzang also knew. After all, he wouldn't exist in this world for long. Perhaps he could do something for her. To kill the three-horned rhinoceros that had just bullied her. Boom! Hades Tenzang's eyes were sharp. With a hard slap, he broke the last horn of the three-horned rhinoceros. The three-horned rhinoceros let out a miserable howl. The great sage's blood spilled across the starry sky. The three-horned rhinoceros horn was broken and hovering in the battlefield of the stars. Horned Demon Patriarch was scared. He was really scared. He thought that Hades Tenzang would no longer be as brave as he was in the past. However, he never thought that Hades Tenzang would be even crazier and more abnormal than he was in the past. He didn't treat the three-horned rhinoceros at all. He took a step. Hades Tenzang's black hair tore through the sky like thunderbolts. His eyes were sharp, and he rode on the three-horned rhinoceros's back. Then he raised his huge fists and smashed them down again and again. Boom, boom, boom. Every punch made the three-horned rhinoceros cough up blood. The sword demon patriarchs were stunned. If this goes on, the three-horned rhinoceros will be killed. The fall of the patriarchs of the 9 Nether Prison clans was definitely an earth-shattering event for Nether Prison. They couldn't afford to take this responsibility. Go and save it, Sword Demon Patriarch roared. Thousands of swords swept out of him. 10,000 swords returned to origin. Boom, boom. The swords broke free from the great sage Acheron. They turned into a river of swords and rushed toward Hades Tenzang. The river of swords carried terrible power and seemed to be able to cut through everything. This was Sword Demon Patriarch's strongest trick. In the past, he had used the same move when he faced Tian Song. Buzz, Hades held the halberd in his hand. Hades Tenzang's eyes were sharp. Then, he swung Hades' halberd and drew a circle over his head. Boom, boom, boom. The river of swords poured down and smashed into the circle, but they didn't go any further. All the swords were knocked away. Then, the huge fist smashed down again and hit the three-horned rhinoceros. Ice Saint stared blankly at the scene. Her nose finally turned red, and she covered her mouth with her slender hand. On the Netherworld ship, Yu's eyes flickered. Yu pursed her lips. Bufang's face was expressionless. Hades' Era's brows kept twitching. My dad's flirting skills are as awesome as ever. Suddenly, Bufang's mind flickered, and he narrowed his eyes. Rumble. A terrifying pressure suddenly descended upon the world. This pressure was incomparably terrifying. As soon as it appeared, it was as if the whole world was about to be destroyed. Everyone jerked their heads in a direction. There, the sky and earth of the battlefield of the stars were torn apart. A silhouette slowly walked out from within. Everyone sucked in a cold breath. The sky and earth of the battlefield of the stars were very stable. To tear it apart, the force needed was too great. However, the newcomer could tear the void and come out. How strong was he? It was an expert with golden light all over his body. He was tall and burly, and his face was serious. His eyes were cold and emotionless, as if he could destroy everything. Terrible fluctuations shook the void. Tyrant Patriarch, as the man walked through the starry sky, the world around him seemed to distort. The turbulence in the void whipped him, but he remained unmoved. He was able to resist the whipping of the turbulence with just his fleshly body. He was incomparably strong. A terrible pressure swept across the whole place, making it hard for everyone to breathe. Tyrant Patriarch was one of the top 3 patriarchs of the 9 Nether Prison clans. His strength was much stronger than that of Sword Demon Patriarch. He did not come to Nether Prison's attack on Earth Prison this time, but no one expected that he would tear the void and appear at this critical moment. Buzz, his eyes were like sharp streams of light, shooting over and cracking the void. Many people felt their eyes sting when they met his gaze. Bufang even narrowed his eyes slightly. Hades Tenzang, you're like a ghost. If you're dead, just be a ghost. Why come back to the world? Put down the horned beast. Tyrant Patriarch stepped through the void, his overbearing voice ringing through the heavens. Riding on the rhino's head, Hades' Tenzing gave Tyrant Patriarch an indifferent look. Hades thrust the halberd in his hand into the rhino's head. But he still handed the flatbread to him and watched as Hades' Era stuffed it into his mouth. Chapter 1338. After all, Hades' Tenzing was already dead. Although the fortune flatbread could bring him back to life for a short time, it couldn't make him live forever. Hades' Tenzing himself knew this, so he killed Horned Demon Patriarch in a short time. The great sage's blood dyed the starry sky and the battlefield. A huge corpse of the great sage lay in the starry sky. The rhino's true form was a savage beast, and it was a very powerful one. Its huge body hovered like a mountain, and blood kept flowing out of its huge gash. He was a nether prison patriarch with terrifying strength, but now he had died tragically in the battlefield of the stars. An oppressive aura filled the air. Sword Demon Patriarch and the others fell silent, and their eyes flashed with cold light. Tyrant Patriarch's eyes were as sharp as lightning, bursting with boundless light. Looking at the rhino's corpse, his anger kept rising, and the golden light on his body grew brighter and brighter. There was a hint of sorrow in Ice Saint's eyes. As she watched Hades' Tenzing's body turn into smoke and dissipate, she felt a stabbing pain in her heart. Bufong fell silent. Then, he handed the fortune flatbread to Hades' Era. Era grabbed it and stuffed it into his mouth. Perhaps he wanted to be lucky, or perhaps he wanted to fill his heart with hope. However, Bufong knew that it was impossible for the same kind of fortune to appear in a short time, and the probability was very small, especially when an existence like Hades' Tenzing was summoned. The luck needed to obtain such a fortune was simply heaven-defying. Hades' Era should have just been lucky enough to summon Hades' Tenzing. However, if he wanted to do it again, the difficulty was close to impossible. With the dry flatbread stuffed in his mouth, Hades' Era's aura soared, but his movements gradually slowed down. Sure enough, he couldn't summon it again. Even though the fortune gas had entered his body and improved his cultivation base by several revolutions, it didn't bring him any joy. He would rather not improve his cultivation. Yuchi and Yuchi's eyes were also filled with sorrow. They were also very respectful towards Hades' Tenzing. After all, it was Hades' Tenzing who gave them life and brought them back from nether prison to earth prison. Hades' Tenzing was like their father. Bufong watched as Hades' Era choked on his biscuit. His eyes widened as he coughed continuously. He couldn't help but sigh. He raised his hand and gently patted Hades' Era's back. It helped him catch his breath. Come on, people have to look forward, Bufong said seriously. Hades' Era let out a sigh of relief. At this moment, he had also calmed down. Forget it. If I can't recruit them, then so be it. After all, this father of mine is only here to pick up girls. Hades' Era twitched his mouth and said something he didn't mean. The corner of Bufong's mouth twitched. He thought what Hades' Era said made sense. Looking at Ice Saint in the distance, whose eyes were red as if she was touched, he couldn't help but marvel at Hades' Tenzing's powerful skills in picking up girls. But a terrible aura burst out of the void. Tyrant Patriarch's eyes swept across the battlefield like a dragon. Sword Demon Patriarch and the others floated up and landed behind Tyrant Patriarch. Their terrible auras towered into the sky, as if to distort everything. Oh no! Hades' Era's face turned very unsightly. His heart trembled as he sensed Tyrant Patriarch's domineering aura. It was time for the great sage Acheron's fortune. Tian Song, on the other hand, had disappeared as well. If that happened, Earth Prison would be at a complete disadvantage in the battlefield of the stars. In the face of Nether Prison, who had Tyrant Patriarch, they were now like fish on the chopping block. Great sage Acheron floated around Bufong and the others. On his head, there were already black hair, stubble growing out. He was no longer bald, so he was no longer as strong as before. Great sage Acheron was actually looking forward to his formidable strength. However, he also knew his own limits. In a short period of time, it was impossible for him to become bald again, and it was impossible for him to become so strong. He had regrets, but more importantly, he was thinking about how to face Tyrant Patriarch's wrath. Tyrant Patriarch ranks third among the 9 Patriarch-level experts of the 9 Nether Prison clans. His strength is second only to Nether Puppeteer Patriarch and D-Ting Patriarch. Great Sage Acheron said, "Although he's only ranked third, it's enough to crush us." Judging from the punch he exchanged with Tyrant Patriarch just now, Tyrant Patriarch's strength was really terrifying. Although they had won the war on the ground, that was. However, the premise was that their Great Sage could hold off the other side's Great Sage. Once Nether Prison's Great Sage won, the war on the ground would be meaningless. If that happened, the victory on the ground would be meaningless. In front of a 9 Revolution Great Sage, influencing a war was as simple as eating and drinking. Ice Saint, Great Sage Acheron, Hades Era, and the others had gathered around the Netherworld ship. They looked warily at the experts in the distance, led by Tyrant Patriarch. Tyrant Patriarch was a sage who could resist the erosion of the energy in the starry sky with his fleshly body alone. Therefore, his strength was beyond ordinary people's imagination. His eyes swept across the crowd like torches. At last, he fixed them on Buffon. Sword Demon Patriarch whispered something in Tyrant Patriarch's ear. Tyrant Patriarch's eyes grew sharper as he looked at Buffon. It was as if it was looking at its prey. "That young man is the inheritor of the person you mentioned." Tyrant Patriarch's cold voice resounded in the battlefield of the stars like the sound of metal scraping against metal. Sword Demon Patriarch nodded solemnly. Back in hell, he hadn't been able to kill that brat, and had even sent Black Demon to assassinate him. Instead, Black Demon had been killed instead. The situation puzzled Sword Demon Patriarch a little, but it didn't matter. Today, all troubles had to be resolved. Killing him will solve the problem once and for all, and there will be no more threats. If that man's legacy doesn't appear again, no one can stop the rise of Nether Prison, said Sword Demon Patriarch. Tyrant Patriarch nodded, seemingly agreeing to Sword Demon Patriarch's request. The next moment, he took a step forward. Boom! The muscles on his body trembled, causing the void to crack. In a flash, he appeared in front of Bu Fong and the others. That person's successor, Patriarch Tyrant said lightly. The next moment, he reached out a hand toward Bu Fong's head. The hand seemed to be made entirely of gold, and streams of golden light flowed across it. Bu Fong slightly furrowed his brows. He felt a pressure that made his muscles tremble slightly. "Come here." Tyrant Patriarch bellowed coldly. Boom! Great Sage Acheron's water poured out of him, turned into a blood-colored water dragon, and rushed out. He pointed a finger straight at Tyrant Patriarch. The water dragon roared and slammed into Tyrant Patriarch's hand, producing a deafening rumble. The blood-colored water dragon coiled around Tyrant Patriarch, trying to restrain him. "Acheron, where's your previous strength? You're so weak now." Tyrant Patriarch's eyes flashed brightly. At the moment, Great Sage Acheron was only equivalent to Sword Demon Patriarch. He didn't take him seriously at all. Rumble. Tyrant Patriarch clenched his fists and his aura soared, causing the water dragons to explode in an instant. Water splashed in all directions. Columns of blood-colored water turned into arrows and shot toward Bu Fong and the others. Great Sage Acheron staggered a few steps, and his face grew unsightly. Ice Saint's eyes had turned ice blue. A snowstorm swept up in an instant, freezing the water columns in midair. Tyrant Patriarch watched the scene. He narrowed his eyes slightly. Buzz, suddenly, a beam of golden light flashed across the battlefield of the stars. Tyrant Patriarch suddenly appeared in front of Ice Saint. "I told you, you can't stop me." A huge golden fist enlarged in front of everyone's eyes. Then the fist smashed down. The ice shattered in an instant, and a cracking sound rang out as numerous cracks spread across its surface. Rumble, the ice crumbled. Ice Saint snorted softly and staggered backward in the air. With every step he took, ice crystals would form and shatter. Damn it. If this goes on, all of us will be killed by this big guy. Hades' era's pupils constricted. He put away his playfulness and said solemnly, Tyrant Patriarch's strength was beyond their expectation. Where's that mangy dog? Didn't he go to the Black Temple with you? Why did you come back, but he didn't? With that mangy dog here, maybe there's still hope. Great sage Acheron jerked his head to look at Hades' era. Where's Lord Go? Bufong also frowned. A helpless look came over Hades' era's face. Earth Prison Dog might have found some fortuitous encounter in the Black Temple and fallen into a deep sleep. When he wakes up, that dog will become even more terrifying. But I'm afraid we can't count on him now. Hades' era sighed softly. Then let's attack together. Great Sage Acheron took out the jade wine jar and took a swig. The taste of the wine lingered in his mouth, causing his aura to climb and reach its peak. Boom! Acheron's water swept out and turned into a huge blood dragon behind Acheron Great Sage. At Great Sage Acheron's command, the blood dragon flapped its wings and sped away. The sky seemed to be about to be torn apart. Ice Saint's eyes suddenly burst out with a bright blue light. Her slender fingers kept pointing in the air. Then, the whole area seemed to turn into a world of ice and snow. In the blink of an eye, the huge blood dragon turned into a huge blood-colored ice crystal and rushed toward Tyrant Patriarch. This was the joint attack of two great sage patriarchs, and its power was extraordinary. Hades' era held the Hades halberd and wore the Hades armor. He leaped up and landed on the tail of the ice crystal blood dragon. As he galloped forward, his aura continued to gather. Finally, he rushed to the blood dragon's head. He leaped high into the air. Hades' halberd glowed with a bright light. It swept out in an instant. A half-moon halberd light shot out. The halberd light, the blood dragon, and the ice crystal. It shot toward Tyrant Patriarch. For a moment, its power was unparalleled. Even Sword Demon Patriarch would have to flee in terror from such an attack. However, Tyrant Patriarch was still indifferent. He raised his hand. The blood dragon charged at him. With a rumble, he intercepted it with one hand. As for the half-moon halberd light, Tyrant Patriarch opened his mouth and let out a loud cry. At the same time, his blood and chi surged and surged. A terrible rumble seemed to sweep through heaven and earth. A golden bolt of lightning burst out of his mouth. The lightning smashed down and shattered the half-moon halberd light. As for the ice crystal blood dragon, the ice crystals on it emitted a chill that seemed to spread along Tyrant Patriarch's hand that was holding the blood dragon's head. However, it was indeed washed away by the surging blood and chi. Hot steam rose from it. Tyrant Patriarch's arm suddenly grew thicker. The next moment, he closed his palm and squeezed it. There was a cracking sound. The giant ice crystal blood dragon was forcefully squeezed until it exploded. Boom! The sound of an explosion rang out. Great Sage Acheron, Ice Saint, and Hades' era almost despaired. Tyrant Patriarch was almost invincible. It's useless to put up a desperate struggle. Tyrant Patriarch's eyes seemed to be sneering as he glanced at Great Sage Acheron, Ice Saint, and Hades' era. Finally, he fixed his gaze on Bufong. His eyes suddenly became sharp. You must die, Tyrant Patriarch said. Then, he raised his hand and pointed a finger at Bufong. The finger turned solid, as if it was going to kill Bufong in an instant. The rumbling might seem to have shattered the void. A single finger shot across the sky. The expressions of Hades' era and the others changed dramatically. Bufong stood in front of the Netherworld ship. He raised his head and looked at the finger that blotted out the sky and completely filled his vision. His expression didn't change. Ute and Yuji's faces had already turned very unsightly, and Yuji was shivering. Facing this move, Bufong didn't dodge. He took a step forward and rushed toward the finger. Tyrant Patriarch wanted to kill him, and so did Sword Demon Patriarch and the others. However, did they really think he was a fish on the chopping block? A cold smile appeared at the corner of Bufong's mouth. who didn't have a temper, but as his mind flickered, two pots immediately appeared in his hands. One was a perishing pot, and the other was a crazy sword pot, surging with power. His mind flickered. The next moment, the fortune flatbreads appeared and fell into the two woks. The next moment, Tyrant Patriarch's finger struck him. An explosion shook the sky. Tyrant Patriarch was confident that even the 7 or 8 revolution great sage would die, let alone the 9 revolution little saint. Even if that boy was that person's inheritor, he had not grown up yet, so he was still an ant. If he was an ant, he had to accept the fact that he would be killed. But suddenly, Tyrant Patriarch's eyes narrowed. He sensed a strange fluctuation in his divine will. In the explosion, a loud and clear bird cry resounded. The next moment, in the flames that filled the sky, a thin figure floated in midair. He held 2 pots in his hands, a clay pot and a dried pot. He pressed the 2 pots together with all his strength, and a terrifying fluctuation spread out from the 2 pots. However, the energy that leaked out was like the fusion of yin and yang. Guess how lucky I am? Bufong raised his head, his hair fluttering in the wind as he twitched the corner of his mouth. The next moment, the 2 pots containing the fortune flatbreads, which had transformed into the yin-yang fish pot, were thrown out by Bufong. They smashed toward Tyrant Patriarch's tyrant body. Chapter 1339. The perishing pot and the crazy sword pot were mixed together. The two were mixed together in the form of yin and yang fishes. This method was borrowed from his own yin and yang spirit sea. Therefore, he showed a peaceful attitude. Most importantly, Bufong stuffed a fortune flatbread into each of the 2 pots. Bufong had planned to carve the time gourmet array on the yin-yang fish pot, but after thinking about it, he realized that the new gourmet array hadn't been tested yet, so he didn't know how terrifying it would be. If he didn't control it well, it would explode before he threw it out. Therefore, Bufong didn't choose to carve the time gourmet array on it. But like a beam of flowing light, the 2 woks intertwined with each other and then shot forward with incredible speed. In the blink of an eye, the void collapsed as they sped along. Tyrant Patriarch's eyes flashed like lightning as he stared at the 2 pots flying toward him with a disdainful look on his face. Why should he be afraid of the means of a 9 revolution little saint? He was going to smash the 2 pots with one hand. Members of the Tyrant clan had infinite confidence in their fleshly bodies, which were their most powerful means of attack. In the distance, the look on Bufong's face was a little strange when he threw out the 2 pots. The addition of the fortune flatbread was just a flash of inspiration. Even Bufong didn't know how much the power of the 2 pots would increase after they collided. But perhaps it wouldn't be too weak. When he was just a 9 revolution little saint, the power produced by the 2 pots was already very terrifying. Now his strength had improved rapidly and reached the 9 revolution little saint realm. The power of the perishing pot and the crazy sword pot had also increased a lot. This was also the first time Bufong had tested the power of the 2 pots. Since Tyrant Patriarch was so strong, he might as well use him as a test subject. In any case, the other party wanted to kill him, so he deserved to be blown up. When Nether King Ha and the others saw what Bufong threw out, they couldn't help but be stunned. Great Sage Acheron narrowed his eyes, while Ice Saint frowned. Bufong was actually looking forward to it. With the help of the fortune flatbread, he didn't know how powerful the yin-yang fish pot was. This kind of luck, insignificant skill. Tyrant Patriarch's eyes shone like torches. A rich fragrance lingered in the starry sky. Looking at the 2 pots, Tyrant Patriarch's eyes grew colder. As expected, you actually used dishes as a means of attack. You're even more direct than that person. He took a deep breath. Tyrant Patriarch thrust out his palm. He slapped the 2 pots. He wanted to smash the 2 woks into smithereens. There was a loud bang. He swung his palm at it. Then, after a moment of silence, there was a loud explosion. The terrifying explosion swept across the world in an instant and filled the sky. Flames devoured everything. Rumble. A terrifying explosion swept out in an instant. A terrifying wave of air surged out. The energy in the sword pot of destruction boiled and melted the fortune flatbread in it. The next moment, the fortune gas in the flatbread spread to the whole pot. On the other side, the same thing happened to the crazy sword pot. There seemed to be a bright light blooming in the two pots. Tyrant Patriarch felt something was wrong when he slapped the pot with his palm. He furrowed his brows. "Oh!" Sword Demon Patriarch and the others, who were the closest to him, exclaimed in surprise. They seemed to find the trick a little strange. The explosion broke out. Tyrant Patriarch's body was devoured in an instant. Thousands of swords shuttled back and forth in the flames, moving extremely fast. As the fortune gas exploded, the power of the explosion rose again. The power of the explosion rose again, and with a deafening rumble, Sword Demon Patriarch and the others retreated several steps in horror. Waves of air filled the air. A deafening explosion resounded through the skies. Everyone was completely shocked. Looking at Tyrant Patriarch, who was devoured by the flames, they couldn't help but swallow. Was this really the work of a chef, who was only a 9-revolution little saint? Its power was comparable to the offensive means of the 9-revolution great sage. The terrible destructive power seemed to be about to collapse the battlefield of the stars. Great sage Acheron widened his eyes. Then he grinned. Looking at Tyrant Patriarch, who was devoured by the flames, he felt a sense of satisfaction. This explosion should be enough to make that guy suffer. Great sage Acheron said excitedly. Tyrant Patriarch was strong, but ordinary people couldn't withstand such an explosion. Even a tyrant body would be injured. My little friend Bufong always comes up with some messy things. I can't believe the power of the pot has increased so much as his strength has improved. In the future, when Bufong's cultivation base reached the level of the great sage, the pot would blow a hole in the starry sky. It was simply too violent. In the sky, surging sword intent swept out as if to tear the sky apart. After a long time, it slowly retracted and gradually disappeared. The void was silent. Everyone was staring at the center of the battlefield. Over there, Tyrant Patriarch bore the brunt of the terrible explosion. Everyone was curious whether Tyrant Patriarch's mighty body could withstand the explosion. Would it be reduced to ashes in the air? Sword Demon Patriarch and the others focused their eyes as if they wanted to see through the void. Suddenly, everyone's pupils constricted. Hades era, Acheron, Great Sage, and the others also focused their eyes. In the void, the aftermath of the explosion spread, and the smoke and dust dissipated. The flames disappeared, and the sword energy collapsed. A figure stood upright in the battlefield of the stars. Soon, everyone saw the figure clearly. They all sucked in cold breaths. Tyrant Patriarch stood proudly in the battlefield of the stars, his hair striking the sky like thunderbolts. His face looked as if it had been carved by a knife. His muscles bulged, and his entire body seemed to have grown several times larger out of nowhere. His muscles, which were like those of a horned dragon, seemed to contain the power to destroy heaven and earth. There were sword marks all over his body, which should have been caused by the crazy sword pot's sword energy. One of them was even more hideous. It went from the base of his neck to his waist, looking very ghastly. Drops of blood seeped out of it. However, it was only a little. Gurgle, gurgle. Tyrant Patriarch's eyes were indifferent. The corners of his mouth curved upward slightly. The wounds on his body were wriggling at a speed visible to the naked eye as they began to heal rapidly. In just a few moments, the hideous wound returned to its original state. As his muscles bulged, his blood and energy surged like mighty waves hitting the reef, producing a loud explosion. The rumbling was deafening. I have to say, your technique is indeed amazing. If you were an ordinary 9-revolution great sage, you would have been seriously injured. Unfortunately, you met me. Tyrant Patriarch's eyes turned and fell on Bufong. There was a hint of admiration in his eyes as he looked at Bufong. What he said was right. The Tyrant clan had an invincible fleshly body. Their fleshly body had even reached the level of immortality. If it were Sword Demon Patriarch and the others, they might have been seriously injured by Bu Fong's move. The enhancement of the Fortune Flatbread had made the power of the technique even more terrifying. The power of the Perishing Pot and the Sword Pot was almost equal to the punch of the bald Acheron. However, with the enhancement of the Fortune Flatbread, it was a little stronger than the punch of the bald Acheron. Tyrant Patriarch, on the other hand, was covered with cuts and bruises. However, but to Tyrant Patriarch, this kind of injury was just a minor one. You are indeed that man's inheritor. You're very strong, very talented. Perhaps compared to that man, your potential may be greater, because even that man couldn't hurt a hair of mine when he was as strong as you are now. The corners of Tyrant Patriarch's mouth twitched. His smile was a little gruesome, and it made the hair of those who saw it stand on end. But that's why you have to die. Gurgle, gurgle. All of the sword scars had recovered, and the large wounds had also healed in an instant. Tyrant Patriarch raised his hand and looked at his body, which was as good as new. A faint smile appeared on his face. Now it's my turn. Tyrant Patriarch looked up and fixed his eyes on Bu Fong. Bu Fong's pupils constricted, and his whole body tensed up as if he was being stared at by a viper. This feeling, it was extremely uncomfortable. Rumble. A golden figure streaked across the sky. In just a flash, he appeared in front of Bu Fong. His oppressive aura made everyone tremble. Tyrant Patriarch's body bulged like a little giant, and his fist was even bigger than Xiaobai's. The next moment, he threw a punch at Bu Fong's head. If this punch landed, it would probably blow up Bu Fong's head. Great Sage Acheron suddenly appeared. He threw out his hand, and the water of the Acheron River quickly gathered into a spinning vortex in his palm. He wanted to fend off the punch. Boom! The fist smashed down. Great Sage Acheron's Acheron River vortex exploded. Great Sage Acheron's pupils constricted. His whole body was sent flying like a cannonball, smashing into the meteorite with a loud bang. Blood spurted out of his mouth. Tyrant Patriarch, who had gone all out, had made Great Sage Acheron vomit blood with just one move. Was this the power of the Great Sage at the consummate level? Ice Saint and Hades Era narrowed their eyes. They were about to make a move. However, Tyrant Patriarch jerked his head around and let out a deafening roar like a savage beast. Get lost! Roar! Hades Era and Ice Saint were in a trance. They felt as if a multicolored savage beast was roaring at them. A majestic wave of blood chi surged over, forcing the two of them to take several steps back. His leg whipped out fiercely. Then, she aimed at Bu Fong's head. Nethery's pitch-black eyes glowed with a green radiance as she stood up straight on the Netherworld ship. Her aura began to fluctuate. However, as soon as she moved, she was stopped by Bu Fong. Looking at the terrifying and oppressive Tyrant Patriarch, Bu Fong's eyes narrowed. Tyrant Patriarch is really strong. How terrifying are Nether Puppeteer Patriarch and D-Ting Patriarch, who are even stronger. For the first time, Bu Fong felt that the Nether Prison strength was so strong. Bu Fong, on the other hand, had a vague feeling that the patriarchs of the 9 Nether Prison clans wanted to kill him. Perhaps they have something to do with the previous host, so they're afraid of me growing up. A thought flashed through his mind. Bu Fong's divine will sank into his spirit sea in an instant. 9 vortexes were spinning at the same time, and a golden book hovered over them with 2 drops of golden liquid on it. They were the god of cooking's divine power, liquid drops. Buzz, White Tiger, lying in a corner of the spirit's sea, opened his eyes. Even the slumbering black tortoise looked over in confusion. The golden divine dragon was already shouting, "Little host, you're wasting God's gift. Are you going to waste divine power liquid drops again? Do you know how precious these divine power liquid drops are?" The artifact spirits fixed their eyes on Bu Fong, who was hovering over the golden book. White Tiger got to his feet. Perhaps he really couldn't stand it any longer. "Host, don't waste divine power liquid drops. Let me do it. It's not easy to get divine power liquid drops, so you must cherish them," White Tiger said. Bu Fong paused for a moment. He didn't expect the artifact spirits to react so violently. The enemy this time is stronger. So isn't it normal to use divine power liquid drops? Didn't those artifact spirits go crazy when he killed Black Demon, the weak 9 Revolution great saint of the Black Temple, with a single divine power liquid drop? The enemy this time may be the perfected great sage. Bufong's face was very serious. However, the white tiger raised its head proudly. The perfected great sage? In my eyes, he's nothing but trash. Besides, he should be looking forward to meeting me. Buzz in midair, Tyrant Patriarch threw a punch. The next moment, his fist froze, because he saw the change in Bufong's eyes. They had become extremely sharp. It was like a sharp long sword, or a high and mighty lord of all beasts. His black hair turned white in an instant. White-haired Bufong raised his chin, grabbed a fortune flatbread, stuffed it into his mouth, and took a bite. Tyrant boy, long time no see. Chapter 1340. White-haired Bufong. On the Netherworld ship, you saw Bufong's hair turn white, and a strange look came over her face. This familiar white, that arrogant Bufong is here? Tyrant body boy, it's been a long time. The corners of white-haired Bufong's mouth curved upward into an evil smile. He grabbed the fortune flatbread and bit into it with a crunch. The flatbread was crushed in an instant. Then he put it in his mouth and chewed. The fortune energy poured into his mouth, turned into a mysterious energy, and poured into Bufong's body. Crunch, crunch, crunch. In a flash, a whole fortune flatbread went down his stomach. A gulp rang out. White-haired Bufong swallowed the flatbread. He stuck out his tongue and licked his lips. Tyrant Patriarch's pupils constricted as he stared at white-haired Bufong. When his eyes met the latter's sharp sword eyes, he shuddered. "What did you say?" Tyrant Patriarch roared. "Tyrant body boy? Who in the entire netherworld dared to call me Tyrant Patriarch? This reckless boy in front of me. It seems you haven't recognized me yet. But don't worry, you'll soon know who I am," white-haired Bufong said, twitching his mouth. Then his eyes moved and rested in the distance. There, Sword Demon Patriarch and the others were all watching. In his spirit sea. "Why did he eat the fortune flatbread?" Bufong asked, looking at the situation outside with an expressionless face. "How can he fight if he doesn't eat it? Little Ho's strength has improved very fast, but Tyrant Body Boy is, after all, the great sage. Without some external means, White Tiger won't be able to defeat him." The golden divine dragon hovered beside Bufong, shaking his head. "But it's good that you didn't use the divine power liquid drop. It's very useful. It's a waste to kill a great sage." Bufong didn't think so. He wasn't familiar with the effect of the divine power liquid drop. Perhaps it was very useful, but if it couldn't be used in an effective way, then no matter how useful it was, it would become useless. "Can you beat them after eating the fortune flatbread?" Bufong brought the topic back. The golden divine dragon glanced at Bufong and suddenly smiled mischievously. That's right, he smiled. It was as if he was mocking Bufong. "Little host, do you think everyone is as unlucky as you?" The golden divine dragon shook his head once more. 2 fortune flatbreads and a death food tool actually didn't kill that tyrant body brat. You didn't even touch a bit of the fortune flatbreads. The corner of Bufong's mouth twitched. At the very least, he managed to leave Tyrant Patriarch riddled with scars. If it were me, Nicholas the Handsome Dragon, I would have been able to kill that Overlord Body Kid with a mouthful of creation gas and a walk. The golden divine dragon was so excited that his body was twitching. As an artifact spirit, his luck won't be too bad, especially the white tiger. The golden divine dragon said. Boom! White-haired Bufong's aura began to seethe. From a 9 Revolutions little saint level, he broke through the shackles in an instant. A white flame suddenly emerged around Bufong. As soon as it appeared, the void twisted. Boom! A white tiger heaven stove emerged above Bufong's head, and a misty small world emerged in it. In the small world, thousands of flames were burning, boiling, and thousands of worlds were collapsing. First revolution, second revolution, third revolution, fourth revolution, his aura rose steadily. In a short while, he reached the 7 revolutions great sage. Roar! White-haired Bufong jerked his head up, his white eyes blazing with flames. There was a loud bang. His aura soared again. Terrifying and scorching flames blazed, causing the entire Star Wars battlefield to distort. 8 revolutions, 9 revolutions, boom! His white hair seemed to fly backward. His aura could suppress the heavens. The white flames surrounding his body continued to linger around him. In the end, they condensed into a bright, white, flaming tiger in the air. The tiger opened its mouth and let out a deafening roar. It roared into the sky. With a single thought, he became the 9 revolutions great sage. In his spirit sea, Bufong was dumbfounded. He had always thought that eating a fortune flatbread to go from the 9 revolutions little saint to the 9 revolutions great sage was a joke. It was a slogan he used to fool people. But now, it seemed that wasn't the case. White Tiger, this arrogant fellow, was actually so lucky. Bufong had eaten a fortune flatbread before, but it only made his divine will a little stronger. Compared to White Tiger's luck, that level of improvement was rubbish. Hee hee. White Tiger's luck is really awesome, but that's because I didn't go. My luck is even more heaven-defying. The golden divine dragon said, crossing his arms over his chest. The black tortoise and the vermilion bird rolled their eyes. Bufong didn't understand, but he thought it was awesome. In the battlefield of the stars, everyone was stunned. They couldn't believe their eyes as they watched Bufong's cultivation base climb steadily and reach a terrifying level that made their hearts tremble. From the 9 revolutions little saint to the 9 revolutions great sage in a single thought. This kind of impossible thing actually happened in front of them. Clatter! In the meteorite, rubble rolled down. Great sage Acheron climbed out of it, coughing up a mouthful of blood. Looking at Bufong in the distance, his aura surging, he was shocked. So strong. I didn't expect my little friend Bufong to be so lucky. Great sage Acheron sat cross-legged on the meteorite, watching seriously. Suddenly, he seemed to have thought of something, and his eyes turned bloodshot. That's not right. Why isn't he bald after becoming stronger? Why am I bald after becoming stronger? It's not fair. This was a very serious topic. Tyrant Patriarch's eyes were filled with horror. He stepped back step by step in the starry sky. He looked at the colorful white tiger around white-haired Bufong. And then he saw Bufong's familiar eyes. Tyrant Patriarch's body suddenly trembled. It was as if he had recalled some distant memory. You. Tyrant Patriarch was horrified. He pointed at white-haired Bufong. In his memory, Tyrant Patriarch had seen this kind of situation before. However, this person was different. You really are his inheritor. Tyrant Patriarch took a deep breath. Kill. Boundless killing intent suddenly boiled up. His chest muscles kept trembling as if they were about to explode. Boom! He threw out a dazzling golden fist that seemed to be able to destroy the stars. The power of this punch was extremely terrifying. White-haired Bufong was shrouded in flames. He raised his hand, clenched his fist, and felt the terrible power surging in his body. The corners of his mouth twitched. He raised his chin proudly and gave Tyrant Patriarch a sideways glance. White-haired Bufong didn't retreat. Instead, he threw out a fist wrapped in flames. Boom! Tyrant Patriarch's fist collided with white-haired Bufong's in the void. A violent explosion spread out as if it was causing the stars to vanish. A terrible explosion shook the heavens. After the punch, both of them disappeared from where they were. They collided again in the sky 10,000 meters above the ground. Their fists collided without any fancy moves. Every time they collided, a mighty energy rumbled. It's useless. I'm the great sage of the perfected stage. Even if you become the great sage of the 9 revolution, you're still weaker than me. Tyrant Patriarch roared. He punched, kicked, whipped, and elbowed. His whole body had turned into a great killing weapon. His terrifying muscles bulged like dragons. The two collided in an instant. In just a breath's time, They had punched hundreds of times in a row. The tyrant clan became a saint with their fleshly bodies, which were the strength they were most proud of. They were invincible when it came to fleshly bodies. Boom! A rumbling sound rang out. White-haired Bufong was knocked flying away. However, as he was sent flying, he disappeared in a flash. When he reappeared, he was behind Tyrant Patriarch. After so many years, you've grown a lot stronger. But in my eyes, you're all trash. He snorted arrogantly. White-haired Bufong punched Tyrant Patriarch. Tyrant Patriarch was knocked flying away. Tyrant Patriarch, of course, was not willing to give up, so he came back again. The two of them were engaged in a fierce fight. The scene of the battle shocked everyone. Hades' mouth fell open, his face blank. He didn't expect that Bufong would become so strong. A second ago, he was still a 9-revolution little saint, but the next moment, he had become a 9-revolution great sage. Did Bufong have such heaven-defying luck? Sword Demon Patriarch and the others trembled. Their hearts trembled as they watched white-haired Bufong fight Tyrant Patriarch. When they saw the familiar whistling sound enveloped by flames, they recalled some scenes they didn't want to recall. Rumble. In the starry sky, a multicolored white tiger, covered in flames, clawed, bit, and whipped its tail and attacked with terrifying force. He was fighting Tyrant Patriarch in the starry sky. The white tiger battled Tyrant body. The battle shocked everyone. Wounds gradually appeared on Tyrant Patriarch's body. There were still white flames burning on the wound. The raging flames made the tyrant body even more ferocious, and his eyes turned red. That man is dead. Why didn't you disappear with him? His fist shook the starry sky, and he roared. The only reply he got was a sneer from the white tiger. The fluctuations of the battle spread in waves. The battlefield of the stars seemed to be stirred. The ripples of energy continued to spread out. Great Sage Acheron watched with relish. Suddenly, he thought of something. He stepped into the void and soon came to Patriarch Horned Demon's body. Then, he put away the corpse that was as big as a small mountain. Great Sage Acheron smiled happily. Rumble. One meteor after another exploded. Flames spread across the void. A tiger claw slashed down. Tyrant Patriarch's body spun and smashed into a meteorite, shattering it and turning it into a million pieces. His body was covered with bloody wounds, and golden blood flowed out of them. The flames burned on the wounds, preventing his body from healing. Tyrant Patriarch panted violently. Rumble. Flames swept out. White-haired Bufong walked out of the starry sky with his chin raised, looking very proud. He raised his hand, and flames gathered on it, turning it into a tiger claw. You can't kill me, Tyrant Patriarch said as he floated up. Suddenly, a loud laugh burst out of his mouth. The laughter lingered in the sky, and it caused everyone to be extremely shocked. Do you think you can kill me? How long can you last with a piece of flatbread to improve your cultivation base? I can already feel your exhaustion. Once the time is up and your cultivation base recedes, it will be time for me to counterattack. At that time, I will crush your body inch by inch. Break them inch by inch. Tyrant Patriarch grinned, his face filled with a grim expression. White-haired Bufong furrowed his brows. One breath of fortune energy could not last for too long. Bufong could already feel his power beginning to recede. Yes, I can't hold it for too long. It's not enough. Now this level of power is enough for me to use that move. The tyrant body is said to be immortal, isn't it? Let's see if you can withstand this move of mine. White-haired Bufong grinned. Then his mind flickered. A stove emerged over his head once again. The white tiger heaven stove seemed to be emitting a tiger's roar. The stove flew over, expanded in an instant, and eventually turned into a behemoth that blotted out the sky. Rumble. Like a prison, Tyrant Patriarch was imprisoned in it. Tyrant Patriarch's eyes widened. Feeling the boiling flames around him, he roared. His fist landed on the wall of the white tiger heaven stove, but it didn't shake the wall at all. Damn it, let me out. For the first time, fear came into Tyrant Patriarch's eyes. White-haired Bufong crossed his arms over his chest and hovered in midair. The corners of his mouth curved upward slightly. The white tiger is in charge of killing. Do you think I'm joking? Rumble. As soon as his voice rang out, Tyrant Patriarch's figure in the white tiger heaven stove was devoured by the boiling flames. Only his miserable howls were left echoing through the heavens. Everyone felt a chill run down their spines. In the distance, Sword Demon Patriarch and the others were shaking violently. Their eyes were filled with horror. Could it be that Tyrant Patriarch was going to die here today? He was the third strongest expert among the 9 Nether Prison clans. All of a sudden, the whole starry sky seemed to stand still. A hole was torn open in the starry sky. Then, an arm reached out of it, grabbing toward the white tiger heaven stove. That's enough. A deafening voice rang through the heavens. Sword Demon Patriarch and the others were excited when they sensed the aura. It's Nether Puppeteer Patriarch. Nether Puppeteer Patriarch could crush everything when he attacked. White-haired Bufong focused his eyes and stared at the arm that had reached out. His sword eyes were full of seriousness. Are those 2 fellows finally unable to stand it? Suddenly, white-haired Bufong's heart skipped a beat. He jerked his head to look at the void behind him. Behind him, the void was torn apart, and a terrible and majestic aura spread out of it. The void was collapsing. Then, an exquisite dog paw burning with black earth prison flame reached out of it. A gentle and magnetic voice suddenly spread through the starry sky and filled the entire area. Chapter 1341. A gentle and magnetic voice immediately reverberated throughout the world. Everyone was surprised and jerked their heads up to look at the rift in the void. It had split in 2 directions. Some terrible existence was trying to find a way out of it. The Tyrant Patriarch howled miserably in the white tiger heaven stove. The scorching flames enveloped his body, burning him constantly. Although the Tyrant Patriarch's body was invincible, he still suffered great pain from the burning flames. His miserable howls rang in everyone's ears, making their hair stand on end. White-haired Bufong raised his chin proudly, his eyes cold. He looked emotionlessly at Tyrant Patriarch, who was being burned by the white flames. In the distance, Sword Demon Patriarch and the other experts were already dumbfounded, and they felt a chill run down their spines. They couldn't believe that Tyrant Patriarch was sealed in the stove and kept burning. Sword Demon Patriarch's eyes were full of horror. Looking at white-haired Bufong, he seemed to recall something from the depths of his mind. The white flames burned, and Tyrant Patriarch's miserable howls seemed to ring in his ears. Rumble. A rift suddenly tore open between heaven and earth, and a hand reached out of it, aiming straight at Bufong. That's enough. A deafening voice rang out, filling everyone with a sense of supreme majesty. Sword Demon Patriarch was very excited because he knew that Nether Puppeteer Patriarch had made a move. Nether Puppeteer Patriarch ranked 2nd among the 9 Nether Prison Patriarchs. Compared with the mysterious D-Ting, he was the backbone of the 9 Nether Prison Patriarchs. As long as Nether Puppeteer Patriarch made a move, any trouble would be solved. Tian Tsang, who had dominated the world and fought his way to Nether Prison, was invincible. However, when he faced Nether Puppeteer Patriarch, he was defeated and his invincible momentum was hindered. That was why he was assassinated and fell. Therefore, as soon as Nether Puppeteer Patriarch made a move, Sword Demon Patriarch and the others felt that they would win this match. Rumble, rumble. Flames kept burning in the white tiger heaven stove. A vast amount of energy was rapidly dispersing from Tyrant Patriarch's body. He opened his mouth and kept howling. Rumble. Nether Puppeteer Patriarch's palm came flying toward white-haired Bufong. He wanted to slap Bufong to death. White-haired Bufong's eyes narrowed. He also felt an unparalleled pressure. Tyrant Patriarch was the great sage of the Great Perfection Realm. Above the 9 revolutions was the Great Perfection Realm, and there were different levels among the Great Perfection Realm. Nether Puppeteer Patriarch had been a perfected expert for many years, and he had stayed there for a long time. He had touched the barrier of the Great Sage's realm, and he only needed half a step to break through to the supreme realm. It was above the entire netherworld. The aura of this expert was much stronger than that of Tyrant Patriarch. Every increase in strength was an unparalleled advantage and suppression. White-haired Buffon couldn't help but frown in the face of such pressure. The enhancement of the fortune flatbread had begun to wane, so he would have to pay a huge price to resist Nether Puppeteer Patriarch's palm. However, as the void was torn apart, an exquisite dog paw, shrouded in black earth prison flame, thrust out. As soon as the paw appeared, Hades' era and the others were excited. Mangy dog! Earth prison dog! The Lord go! Cries of alarm rang out incessantly. White-haired Buffon looked at the dog paw and narrowed his eyes slightly. How dare you bully the Lord Go's man when the Lord Go is not here? A gentle and magnetic voice rang through the whole world. The next moment, the dog paw slapped down toward Nether Puppeteer Patriarch's palm. The expressions of Sword Demon Patriarch and the others changed slightly. Then they sneered. That mangy dog is strong, but he's only as strong as Tyrant Patriarch. Nether Puppeteer Patriarch is much stronger than Tyrant Patriarch. I can't believe this mangy dog dares to attack Tyrant Patriarch. They were very excited. Nether Puppeteer Patriarch was the top expert among the 9 clans, and he was the foundation of their rule in the netherworld. How could a mere mangy dog stop him? Even if this earth prison dog was amazing, so what? In the face of absolute power, everything would be crushed. Rumble. Nether Puppeteer Patriarch didn't say anything. He slapped down with his palm. The void kept trembling and collapsing, and ripples spread out in all directions. Meteorites in the starry sky kept crumbling under the power of the palm, turning into rubble and scattering in all directions. Shrouded in earth prison flame, the dog paw came slapping down. Without dodging, it collided with the palm. Boom! A terrible explosion shook the void. Everyone felt as if their eardrums were about to be torn apart. Tremendous energy rose into the sky like a tidal wave and rumbled down. Their hearts were filled with shock. A battle of this level simply caused one's hair to stand on end. Evenly matched. They're actually evenly matched. Sword Demon Patriarch and the others shuddered and were horrified. White-haired Buffon's white hair waved in the air as the energy collided. His vermilion robe let out a sonorous bird cry, turned crimson, and wrapped around his body. Rumble. A crimson flame seemed to be burning, forming a supreme defense that blocked all the energy that poured down. White-haired Buffon focused his eyes and stared at the white tiger heaven stove. Inside the stove, Tyrant Patriarch was still howling miserably. After all, he was the great sage of the perfected realm. Although the white tiger heaven stove suppressed him, it would take a long time to burn him. Sizzle. Someone saw Tyrant Patriarch bathed in flames inside the stove, as if he had turned into a flaming man. He struggled and roared incessantly. He kept punching, but he still couldn't get out. The inside of the white tiger heaven stove seemed to have turned into a world of flames. It was going to burn him to death. How dare you? Nether Puppeteer Patriarch flew into a rage. His voice exploded in the sky like a thunderclap, rumbling endlessly. Another palm shot out. The power of this palm grew more and more terrifying. Moreover, when Hades' era and the others saw it, their pupils constricted. The palm seemed to be made of steel, and it didn't look like a human hand. It emitted a cold light. The palm came down. Heaven and earth fell silent. With the Lord Go here, how dare you act violently? A gentle and magnetic voice rang out again, aimed at Nether Puppeteer Patriarch. Another palm shot out. This time, earth prison fire was still surging. The two collided again. The void crumbled. Terrible fluctuations forced many people to retreat. They retreated further and further until they could only watch the battle from a distance. This kind of battle frightened many great sage. Just the aftermath of the battle was enough to make people's hearts palpitate, and they didn't dare to approach. They were all great sage, but why was the gap between them so huge? However, there was an exception. White-haired Bufong was still sitting cross-legged in the center of the battle, motionless like a 10,000-year-old pine tree. No matter how terrible the power was or how violent the impact of the energy was, it couldn't shake him. White-haired Bufong's hair fluttered in the wind as he raised his chin proudly. Sizzle, suddenly, a shocking scene appeared in the White Tiger Heaven Stove. Tyrant Patriarch's body began to melt at a speed visible to the naked eye. Like butter being roasted at a high temperature, he melted at a speed visible to the naked eye, as if he was about to melt into a puddle of water. His thick and powerful arms went limp and drooped to the ground. Flames burned in them. His hands melted, turned into liquid, and dripped to the ground. His flesh collapsed, and one hole after another burst open. His head was full of cracks. His miserable howls shook the heavens. However, as time went by, his howls gradually disappeared, and he couldn't even scream anymore. He had turned into a puddle of boiling liquid in the stove. Hiss! Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. A madman. He was simply a madman. The mighty tyrant Patriarch was burned to death by Bufong. Nether Puppeteer Patriarch flew into a rage when he sensed that, and his attacks became fiercer. However, Lord Dog's Earth Prison Flame attack was also unceasingly bombarding. Although neither of them showed up, the collision of their attacks alone was enough to crush everyone present. Buzz, after a long time, everything in the stove returned to silence. Tyrant Patriarch was completely silent. All that was left was the blazing fire in the stove. The fire crackled and was scorching hot, but made people feel extremely cold. Although it was a fire, it emitted a coldness as cold as ice. Tyrant Patriarch was dead. Buzz, Bufong's hair began to transform at a speed visible to the naked eye. From white to black, the white tiger returned to Bufong's spirit sea, and its pupils became gentle, losing the sharpness from before. Bufong was also shocked. Tyrant Patriarch was a mighty existence. He was the great sage, who ranked third among the 9 Nether Prison clans. Even Hades' Tenzang couldn't kill him. And now Bufong had done it. Of course, he did it with the help of the artifact's spirit. But it was still incredible. The fall of a perfected great sage was a great shock to the whole netherworld. For Nether Prison, it was an unbearable loss. Rumble. The void crumbled. Nether Puppeteer Patriarch stopped attacking. The void was torn apart. A figure was faintly discernible in the turbulence of the void. A pair of terrible eyes emerged, staring straight at Bufong. Tyrant Patriarch and Horn Beast are dead in this battle, leaving only 7 of the 9 Nether Prison Patriarchs. Nether Prison will not accept this price. All of you will die with them. His words were full of terrible meaning. It made the hearts of Hades' era and the others tremble. Nether Prison unifies the netherworld and builds a great world. This is what the Great Path needs. No one can stop it. You can't do it. Anyone who tries to stop it will be punished. Buzz Bufong stood proudly in the starry sky. His face was indifferent. Suddenly, in the turbulence, a gaze suddenly fell on Bufong. It was as if it was looking down at him from the 9th heaven. The gaze was so deep that it seemed to tear Bufong's mind apart. Behind Bufong, the void was torn apart. There were also endless turbulence churning in it. A slender figure of a dog with flames all over its body appeared. Nether Puppeteer Patriarch's eyes seemed to be fixed on the dog. Their gazes swept across the turbulence and collided. What do you have? Lord Go, I'm waiting. A gentle and magnetic voice rang out. They looked at each other for a long time. Then, Nether Puppeteer Patriarch's pupils constricted. Impossible. A dog like you actually wants to take that step? Impossible. You can't do it. Nether Puppeteer Patriarch was suddenly very excited. He roared. However, the only response he got was Lord Go's disdainful laugh. You can't succeed. Just you wait. I'll stop you. Nether Puppeteer Patriarch was still roaring. The next moment, the void in front of him slowly healed. Then it disappeared. Bufong stood in the sky, his vermilion robe flapping noisily in the howling wind. Then, the dog in the void turned slowly as if it had stepped into the depths of the turbulence. The void gradually healed up. Lord Dog didn't say anything and disappeared once again. This only left many doubts in the minds of the people present. Bufong frowned. Nether Puppeteer Patriarch said Lord Go was going to take that step? That step? What step was it? The white tiger heaven stove returned to Bufong's side. It turned into a streak of white light and became a belt that was tied around his waist. Bufong clasped his hands behind his back and rolled his eyes. Suddenly, he looked into the distance. There, Sword Demon Patriarch and the others were gathered. They seemed to be frightened by Bufong's glance. This guy was the ruthless man who had killed Tyrant Patriarch. Without hesitation, the Sword Demon Patriarch and the others turned around and sped downward, disappearing into the distance in just a few moments. For a moment, the battlefield of the stars became very quiet. The battle seemed to have ended for the time being. Chapter 1342. The Nether Prison Army retreated in defeat. The great sage of Nether Prison also retreated because of the Lord Go's appearance and the suppression of Nether Puppeteer Patriarch. A fierce invasion war ended with the defeat of the Nether Prison Army. Of course, everyone knew that this was not the end. Although the Nether Prison Army was defeated, they would surely make a comeback, and the next time would be even more tragic. Nether Puppeteer Patriarch and D. Ting, the strongest expert among the 9 Nether Prison clans, did not take part in the battle, though for some reason. For some reason, it gave Earth Prison a chance to catch its breath. Tyrant Patriarch was dead. Once the news got back to Nether Prison, the whole place would be in an uproar. Tyrant Patriarch, the great sage of the perfected realm, the soul of the Tyrant clan, had fallen in this war. To the experts of the Tyrant lineage, this was simply like a disaster, shocking and shocking. Without Tyrant Patriarch, the status of the Tyrant clan would decline sharply, and they would even become the weakest of the 9 clans. Although the great sage was still in charge of the Tyrant clan, the loss of Tyrant Patriarch, who could support the whole clan, made it difficult for the Tyrant clan to have that kind of power. The battlefield of the stars gradually became quiet. All that was left were the broken meteorites and the great sage's blood. Since ancient times, the battlefield of the stars had a city of the great sage's tomb, and countless great sages had fallen here. The battle between Nether Prison and Earth Prison was comparable to the battle when Hades' Tenzang attacked Nether Prison. The number of great sages who died in that battle was also innumerable. However, Earth Prison had suffered a crushing defeat in that battle, and this time, it was Nether Prison that had suffered a crushing defeat. In imprisoned Dragon Pass, on the city wall, the Earth Prison experts all raised their arms and cheered. All of them were extremely excited. They were so excited that they could hardly control their emotions. It was not an easy battle, and Earth Prison had suffered heavy casualties. Some aristocratic families were even completely annihilated. But this was war. If it hadn't been for Bufong's fortune flatbread, Earth Prison would have fallen long ago. This battle was famous only for the fortune flatbread. One piece of cake, one piece of fortune, one piece of cake, turning the situation around. Above imprisoned Dragon Pass, looking at the deathly aura permeating the battlefield, smoke rising into the sky, corpses covered the ground, and blood flowing like a river. Everyone was silent. At this moment, the cruelty of war was on full display in front of them. Ice Saint stood on the city wall in her white dress and looked at the devastated land. She let out a long sigh. Bufong and the others were standing on it. The great sage Acheron squinted his eyes, and the corners of his mouth curled up slightly, as if something good had happened. He looked at Bufong and wanted to say something, but stopped himself. "Forget it. I'll discuss it with you when we get back to the restaurant." The great sage Acheron grinned. You stood at Bufong's side and said nothing. Hades' era and Yinglong had gone to maintain order after the war. Although the war was over for a short time, it didn't mean that everything was over. Nether Prison's desire to unify the Netherworld would certainly not be extinguished like this. So, Nether Prison would definitely start over again. When that time came, it would bring even more terrible killing intent, because that time, Nether Puppeteer Patriarch Di Ting, and other supreme existences might all participate in the war. However, Earth Prison lacked such experts. Bufang seemed to suddenly think of something. He looked at the great sage, Acheron, and Ice Saint. They had lived the longest, so they might know the answer. Nether Puppeteer Patriarch said that the Lord Go is going to take the last step, and he will definitely stop him. What does that mean? The great sage Acheron and Ice Saint looked at each other, their faces growing serious. Tell him, little sister. The great sage Acheron glanced at Ice Saint and said after a moment of thought. Ice Saint nodded. Do you know why Di Ting and Nether Puppeteer Patriarch didn't participate in this war? She asked. Bufang shook his head, puzzled. This was also what puzzled Bufang. If Nether Puppeteer Patriarch and Di Ting joined the war, Earth Prison would never be able to withstand their attacks. Because they can't participate in the war, at their level, they have to think about the higher level. That level is like a hazy fog, unfathomable and unfathomable, Ice Saint said. Hades Tenzang once touched this level, but he gave up. He chose to conquer the world in Nether Prison. Di Ting should have reached this level as well. As for Nether Puppeteer Patriarch, he may be a little weaker. However, Nether Puppeteer Patriarch needs to protect Di Ting from being disturbed, so he didn't come to Earth Prison this time. Bufang listened and nodded with an expressionless face. So what you're saying is that Lord Dog has also reached that level. How can the Lord Go reach out his claws? Ice Saint's long eyelashes fluttered slightly. Looking at Bufang, she said, Earth Prison Dog should have just stepped into that level. That's why he could easily break free and help. When the critical moment comes, a little disturbance could lead to failure. Bufang was lost in thought. No wonder Nether Puppeteer Patriarch was so shocked when he learned the Lord Go has reached that level. When Di Ting stabilizes and Nether Puppeteer Patriarch is free, I'm afraid he will destroy Earth Prison Dog's breakthrough, said Ice Saint. Bufang nodded. Perhaps the Lord Go has his own plan. The battle shocked all the small worlds around the Netherworld. No one thought that Earth Prison could resist Nether Prison's all-out attack. Even Tyrant Patriarch and Horned Demon Patriarch died tragically on the battlefield of the stars. The Vajra Realm experts clenched their fists excitedly. Their realm was destroyed by Tyrant Patriarch. In terms of fleshly body, the Vajra Realm was much weaker than the Tyrant clan. Unfortunately, the Vajra Realm had become Nether Prison's vassal. But that didn't stop them from being excited when they learned of Tyrant Patriarch's tragic death. The West Little Buddhism Realm, the Wandering Soul Realm, and the other small worlds were all boiling. The unstoppable Nether Prison was defeated in the battle with Earth Prison. Earth Prison was worthy of its reputation. Even without Hades Tenzang, it was still not a force to be trifled with. However, they also knew that Earth Prison's resistance to Nether Prison's invasion was only temporary. Nether Prison's goal was to unify the Netherworld and turn it into a great world, with Nether Prison as its center. Nether Prison would never give up its conquest of Earth Prison. Soon, when the Great World Plan was launched, Earth Prison would not be able to withstand Nether Prison's crazy attack. Earth Prison in Acheron City, Acheron Little Restaurant. The street in front of the restaurant was in full swing again. The war was over, and the fame of the brilliant fortune flatbreads had spread throughout Earth Prison. Now, almost everyone in Earth Prison knew the name of Acheron's Little Restaurant. It was a magical dish that could turn the tide of a war. However, it was a pity that after the war, the store's owner had cut down on the sales of the fortune flatbread. Originally, each person could buy 3 flatbreads a day, but now they could only buy 1. However, most people didn't complain. They were happy as long as they could buy 1. Some aristocratic families even sent people to wait in front of the restaurant. As soon as the door was opened, they would buy flatbreads. If they had enough flatbreads, they would come in handy in the future war. None of the aristocratic families were stupid. Earth Prison seemed to have won the war this time, but only the people of Earth Prison knew the crisis. Once Nether Prison attacked again, Earth Prison would not be able to withstand it. If Nether Prison attacked again, there would definitely be stronger experts involved. At that time, Earth Prison, without a top expert, would not be able to withstand it. Although the war was not only a matter of top experts, if the top experts were not matched, how could Earth Prison resist the war? After all, in this world, the strong had the right to speak. Ting-a-ling, the kitchen curtain was lifted by Bufong. Bufong walked out of it. He rolled up his sleeves, revealing his fair arms, and held a basket of fortune flatbreads in both hands. The steaming flatbreads had now become the best-selling dish in Acheron's little restaurant. With a thud, a basket of pancakes was placed on the table of the restaurant. This was the last basket of flatbreads for the day. Bufong could only make a limited amount of flatbreads every day, about 3 baskets. Once they were all sold out, he would not continue to sell them. The customers waiting in line could not wait any longer. They paid for the fortune flatbreads at the same time. The fortune flatbreads were bought. Some people bought fortune flatbreads for the fortune energy contained in them. Some people bought pancakes just for the taste of the pancakes. Apart from the magical fortune energy, the taste of the flatbreads also made many people fall for them. Some people came from thousands of miles away and spent tens of thousands of nether crystals just to have a taste of the flatbreads. When the last fortune flatbreads were sold out, Bufong told the customers who were still waiting in line that the sale was over for the day. Of course, some people felt it was a pity, but some people were still waiting in line. Even if it was not for the flatbreads, it was worth waiting for other delicacies. Sizzle, flames rose to the sky. The cooking in the kitchen was in full swing. After the war, the business of the restaurant picked up again. You temporarily became a waitress and helped Bufong serve the dishes, which saved Bufong a lot of trouble. Sometimes, Little Who would help you, and he was quite obedient. The steaming red braised meat was sparkling and translucent under the light, making Foxy salivate uncontrollably. Being a waitress was also a kind of torture, especially for a foodie like Little Who. So, Little Who couldn't help but run back to the heaven and earth farmland. Great Sage Acheron occasionally came to the restaurant, but he only ordered a dish to go with wine and sat at the table happily. Holding the jade jar, he touched the mouth of the jar with his mouth and took a sip of the wine. He only moistened his lips with the wine. Then he gulped down the food as if he was enjoying it. This kind of life made Great Sage Acheron feel quite comfortable. At least, it was much happier than the days when he only knew how to hold grass. Hades' era finally regained his freedom. Now, whenever he was free, he would come to Acheron's little restaurant and pester Bufong, just for the spicy strips. However, Bufong didn't make things difficult for him and gave him the spicy strip. Then, with the spicy strip in his mouth, he chatted with some people in the restaurant. After chatting for a while, he would swallow the spicy strip. His happy expression made him feel like he was immersed in it. Because of a small restaurant, the remote Acheron city, which no one cared about, seemed to have become the central city of Earth Prison. All the aristocratic families had sent their experts to buy houses in Acheron City. Some rogue cultivators also came to Acheron City because of its fame. People were constantly migrating from the surrounding towns and cities. The desolate Acheron City gradually expanded and became a big city. The city lord of Forbidden Soul City, which was now Acheron City, grinned from ear to ear. He came from an unknown small city lord, and suddenly became the famous city lord of the Infernal Realm. And all this was because of a restaurant. Of course, he was also a regular customer of this restaurant. The day's business was over. However, the nightlife of Acheron City had just begun. On the street, all kinds of steaming food stalls were set up. On both sides of the street, pedestrians came and went. There were lanterns, ceremonial lanterns, and all kinds of delicacies and snacks. Because of a restaurant, the commercial trade of Acheron City was boosted, making Acheron City a famous food city in Earth Prison. All kinds of special delicacies gathered in Acheron City. At night, today, Bufong would no longer stay in the restaurant. He would take you and Little Who out of the restaurant. They would wander on the streets of the city that never sleeps. It was not bad to taste the delicacies of Earth Prison and experience its customs. Earth Prison was vast, but Bufong did not have time to visit all of it. He had only been to Goddess City before, and now he only wandered around in Acheron City. But for Bufong, it was enough. The prosperity of Acheron City had attracted all kinds of delicacies from all over Earth Prison to this place. The name of Gourmet City was well-deserved. At night, Bufong also liked to eat all kinds of delicacies. The atmosphere in Acheron City was very festive. You followed behind Bufong and looked around curiously. On both sides of the street, there were steaming stalls. There were all kinds of delicacies on display, and the stall owners were also cooking. "How much is this, boss?" Bufong looked at a stall, which was surrounded by a group of people. The owner was smiling like a flower as he carried out his business. Bufong came to the front, pointed to the snack made of dough in the pot, and asked, "Young man, this is a special delicacy of Earth Prison. It's the black rice cake from the south of Earth Prison. It's very delicious. Would you like to have one?" The owner explained, looking at Bufong with a smile on his face. Bufong nodded. After paying the nether crystals, he took the black rice cake, held the bag, and ate it with nethery. On the roadside stalls, there were all kinds of delicacies such as grilled chicken feet, steamed overlord snails, fried noodles, and so on. It was dazzling. Just as Bufong and Nethery were enjoying their meal, a voice suddenly rang out. Bufong's footsteps suddenly stopped. A voice rang out in his head. "Huh?" Bufong was stunned. The voice was gentle and magnetic, but it rang out in Bufong's head. "Lord Go." Bufong was slightly taken aback when he heard the voice. Chapter 1343. The Voice of the Lord Go. Bufong used a thin wooden stick to pick up a piece of black rice glutinous cake. This black rice glutinous cake looked like a sparkling black agate, as if it was shining brightly in the night. Hot steam lingered over it, and the surface of the black rice glutinous rice cake was stained with bits of spirit fruit pulp. The Lord Go's gentle and magnetic voice resounded in his ears. Bufong subconsciously thought it was an illusion. Bufong released his divine will, but he could not sense the aura of the Lord Go within a radius of several hundred miles. So, the Lord Go's voice appeared in his head. Was it because he missed the Lord Go too much? Bufong opened his mouth wide and stuffed the black glutinous rice cake into his mouth. The soft black glutinous rice cake emitted warmth in his mouth. When he bit down, it was a little sticky, but at the same time, the fragrance and sweetness of the rice burst forth, giving him an indescribable sense of happiness. This kind of snack from hell was not bad. "Bufong boy." Bufong's mouth kept chewing. The Lord Go's voice became clear once more. This time, Bufong was really stunned. This sound didn't seem to be an illusion. Bufong raised his eyebrows. He waited for the voice to continue telling him. Sure enough, the voice resounded again a moment later. "Bufong brat. Lord Go, I'm hungry. Prepare a portion of sweet and sour dragon ribs for Lord Go. Once I'm full, I'll have the strength to continue fighting." Lord Go's gentle and magnetic voice sounded very serious. However, what he said made Bufong speechless. If Bufong's guess was right, the Lord Go had used a 1,000-mile sound transmission technique, or even 10,000-mile sound transmission technique. This technique had a very high requirement on the spiritual will. Ordinary people wouldn't even be able to do it. Bufong could also send a voice transmission to others. After all, his spiritual force was quite strong. However, it could only work if the target was within the range of his spiritual force. Did the Lord Go spend so much effort to send him a voice transmission just for a bowl of sweet and sour dragon ribs? "Okay, where are you?" Bufong pondered for a moment, but in the end, he didn't reject it. "Lord Go, I'm at the former site of the Black Temple. Come here in 3 days. During these 3 days, Lord Go, I need to break through a small obstacle," Lord Go said. After saying that, the customers gradually dispersed. Bufong was speechless. He had gone through so much trouble to transmit his voice from 1,000 miles away, just for a plate of sweet and sour ribs. This fat dog was too obsessed with sweet and sour ribs. Yu was standing beside Bufong. When she saw Bufong suddenly standing still, she was speechless and blinked her big eyes. "What? Is the black rice glutinous rice not delicious?" Yu asked. Lord Go only sent a voice transmission to Bufong, so you didn't know anything. On her shoulder, Little Who was sitting, holding a roasted phoenix foot and nibbling happily. Although Little Who mainly ate explosive meatballs, he didn't refuse any other delicacies. He was a well-deserved foodie. Only half a month had passed since the war. Little Who's body had grown horizontally, and he had gained a lot of weight. If his mother, the six-tailed fox, saw him, she wouldn't be able to recognize him. Is he a fox or a pig? It's nothing. This glutinous rice tastes good. Bufong twitched the corner of his mouth and shook his head. Then, the two of them didn't say anything else. They turned around and went back into the restaurant. 3 days later, he would send Lord Go sweet and sour ribs to the former site of the Black Temple. Bufong suddenly understood. When Black Demon of the Black Temple died, Lord Go, Hades Era, and Inglong Prison Overlord broke into it. Lord Go might have obtained some resources there. That was why he was in a state of breakthrough. The opportunity in the Black Temple gave Lord Go a chance to break through. That was why Lord Go didn't join the war. Bufong narrowed his eyes and nodded. It was just 3 days later, so Bufong wasn't in a hurry. He grabbed Little Who. Bufong came to the Heaven and Earth farmland. Today, the Heaven and Earth farmland had become more and more vast. As his cultivation base improved, the farmland's area had also become vaster. The heaven tree swayed, and the senseless lotus emitted a bright light. The 9-revolution heavenly path tea tree continued to emit profound musical notes. The entire Heaven and Earth farmland was like a paradise. Bufong came with Little Who. Little Who had gained a lot of weight, seemed to have released his nature. He followed 80, the 8 treasures pig, and the others, running wildly through the green grass of the farmland. Nyohan San came in front of Bufong with a smile on his face. Bufong's apprentice chefs, on the other hand, were exchanging and learning experiences with each other in the distance. After chatting with them for a while, Bufong entered the wooden hut. He began to study the gourmet array. Bufong hadn't found time to study the new gourmet array, the time array. That time in the battlefield of the stars, after throwing out the yin-yang fish pot, Bufong suddenly realized that the time array must have some effect. This array was named Time, which was very domineering. However, as for its effect, Bufong was also very curious. That was why he came to the Heaven and Earth farmland to study it. Naturally, he couldn't study it in a short time. So in the next few days, during the day, Bufong's restaurant was open for business. At night, after eating some delicious food, he would enter the farmland to study the gourmet array, to make more powerful death food tools. However, he found that the time array was very unstable, and ordinary death food tools couldn't maintain it. Thus, the carrier of the time array became a point that Bufong needed to study carefully. On the 3rd day, sunlight shone into the restaurant. Bufong opened his eyes, stretching his body. He walked to the kitchen and began his daily cooking training. Cooking was a skill that could only be learned when one was old. One needed to continuously learn and practice every day in order to master it to its fullest. Sizzle. He prepared the dragon meat and marinated it. Then he put it into a wok, cooking and stir-frying. Soon, a steaming bowl of sweet-in sour dragon ribs was done. He poured it into a flat blue and white porcelain plate, then poured the orange-red sauce over it, making the aroma even more enticing. A plate of sweet-in sour dragon ribs was done. Bufong put the sweet-in sour dragon ribs into the food box he had prepared. Then, he walked out of the restaurant, about to close the door and leave. Because it was still early, the customers in the queue were in 2s and 3s. They were all very surprised by Bufong's appearance. Bufong didn't explain much. He just took a wooden board. On the board, he wrote the words "Rest for a day." Carrying the food box, he strode away. Great Sage Acheron dashed over. He saw Bufong from a distance. Today, he came to find Bufong. He didn't expect Bufong to go out so early. He had something good to exchange with Bufong. Since Bufong hadn't left, he hurried over to tell him. However, when he found out that Bufong was going to give food to the Earth prison dog, Great Sage Acheron was very surprised, and he asked him to go with him. Bufong didn't refuse. It just so happened that Bufong was still a little confused about how to get to the Black Temple's old site. So, with Great Sage Acheron's help, It saved him a lot of trouble. The two of them sped up, treading the air. After a while, they landed in front of the Black Temple's old site. After the fall of Black Demon, the mysterious power that shrouded the Black Temple disappeared. All the experts in the Black Temple were killed by that power. After a forbidden land lost its master, it was no longer qualified to be a forbidden land. All unrelated people would be killed, because they didn't belong to this era. The Black Temple was a majestic palace. The roof was sharp, like many sharp swords, piercing the sky. Each sword was so sharp that it seemed to reflect a cold light. This was the Black Temple, the once glorious Black Temple. Bufong and great sage Acheron arrived outside the Black Temple. The current Black Hall was already in ruins, and its door was covered with dog paw prints. Without a doubt, those dog paw prints were left by the Lord Go. Obviously, the Lord Go had harassed the Black Temple many times before. The Lord Go should know that there was something in the Black Temple that could help him break through. Ha ha! I can imagine Black Demon's constipated face when he was harassed by that mangy dog. Great sage Acheron laughed when he saw the exquisite dog paw prints on the Black Temple's door. The corner of Bufong's mouth also twitched slightly. The two of them didn't stay for long. Bufong raised his hand and pushed open the Black Temple's door. Creak! The Black Temple's door suddenly opened on both sides, and a majestic black aura spread out, as if it was wrapping people's bodies. Tap, tap, tap. As they walked in, only the clear sound of footsteps could be heard. Of course, there were also the scattered bandages on the ground. The Black Temple used to be quite glorious. Unfortunately, the change of an era had turned the once glorious force into ruins. The Black Temple was covered in a layer of dust, as if it had been covered in dust for an era. The Black Temple's experts who used to live in it were like bubbles and illusions. If Bufong hadn't killed the Black Demon with his own hands, he would have known that the Black Demon was real. Perhaps he would have fallen into the illusion that the Black Temple had been ruined for an era. TSK, TSK, TSK. This is the effect of the supreme power of law. Great sage Acheron walked in it with his hands clasped behind his back. The power of law? Bufong was a little puzzled. The so-called power of law is more powerful than the will of the Great Path. The power of law is the origin of the world, and no one can resist it. Even the great sage is like an ant in front of the power of law. Great sage Acheron sighed with emotion. The law. Bufong was lost in thought. To tell you the truth, I'm also very curious about the realm above the great sage. I've cultivated for tens of thousands of years, but I've never touched that barrier. I didn't expect that mangy dog to beat me to it. Great sage Acheron touched his nose. The two of them continued to walk into the depths of the Black Temple. They chatted as they walked, so they didn't feel cold. Suddenly, a black shadow suddenly flashed past. Bufong and Great Sage Acheron's eyes narrowed. Great Sage Acheron even reached out his hand. A mighty power rapidly gathered in his palm. Who's there? Get out here right now. Great Sage Acheron opened his mouth and bellowed. Then, the entire Black Temple flashed with light. A lazy fat black dog was lying on the ground in the distance, yawning nonstop. Lord Go, mangy dog? Bufong and Great Sage Acheron were startled at the same time. They didn't even notice that there was a creature in the palace. Lord Go slightly raised his eyes, glancing at Great Sage Acheron, then at Bufong. Bufong, boy, you're here. Lord Go's gentle and magnetic voice resounded through the entire palace. Bufong nodded. He took out the food box, opened it, and took out the glowing sweet-in sour dragon ribs. A rich aroma instantly filled the air. Lord Go's nose twitched, and his eyes lit up. You sent a message from 1,000 miles away just to eat this sweet-in sour ribs? Why didn't you wait until you broke through? Holding the sweet-in sour ribs, Bufong put the food box on the ground and slowly walked toward Lord Go. He walked to Lord Go's side and placed the blue and white porcelain plate on the ground. Then, he sat down on the cold stairs of the Black Temple. Lord Go glanced at Bufong, but didn't say anything. Then, he began to gorge himself on the plate. It was as if he hadn't eaten sweet and sour ribs for a long time and was extremely hungry. Great Sage Acheron looked at Lord Go's table manners and shook his head, but they didn't say anything. The entire palace reverberated with the sound of Lord Dog wolfing down the food on his plate. After a long time, Lord Go finally finished eating. The blue and white porcelain plate was licked clean. Not a single drop of sweet and sour ribs was left. After eating his fill, Lord Go licked his paws with satisfaction, his mouth slightly curling into a smile. Bufong boy's sweet and sour ribs makes this dog feel good, Lord Go said emotionally. Then, Lord Go opened his eyes and met Bufong's gaze. The latter's questioning look made Lord Go narrow his eyes. I haven't eaten sweet and sour ribs for thousands of years. Now that I have it, I'm really touched, Lord Go said, licking his paws. Thousands of years? Great Sage Acheron and Bufong were dumbfounded. Lord Go had just disappeared for a while. How did it become thousands of years? It's a long story. Lord Go doesn't have time to say too much. Moreover, it's going to be a critical moment, so someone needs to guard it, Lord Go said. That's why I asked Bufong Boy to come. Otherwise, do you think Lord Go went through so much trouble to send you a message just to ask you to deliver sweet and sour ribs? Of course, this is also an important reason. Lord Go twitched his nose, as if he was savoring the taste of sweet and sour ribs. If it fails, Lord Go died with the taste of sweet and sour ribs, so he can die without regrets. Could it be the gourmet array time that was left behind by the previous host? Bufong's heart skipped a beat, and he couldn't help but ponder. What he knew now was that the previous host should be a figure from the previous age. It could be seen from the description of the patriarchs of the 9 Nether Prison clans and Black Demon of the Black Temple. Something major must have happened in the previous age that caused the experts of the 9 Nether Prison clans to kill the previous host. That was the problem. The patriarchs of the 9 Nether Prison clans were experts from the Netherworld, or were they the 9 followers of the previous host? Perhaps only the previous host and the patriarchs of the 9 Nether Prison clans knew this. However, that was not what Bufong needed to think about now. Instead, it was the time formation. It turned out that the gourmet array could be used like this. No. After thinking for a while, Bufong fell silent again. He frowned, feeling that things were not as simple as he had imagined. Bufong had experimented with the time array in the Heaven and Earth farmland. It could indeed control the flow of time, but once a person stepped into the flow of time, he would gradually age as time went by. His physical strength, spirit, and energy would age as if he had spent 1,000 years. However, when Bufong looked at the Lord Go, he didn't have such a side effect. Although the Lord Go had experienced the vicissitudes of 1,000 years, his body was exactly the same as it was 1,000 years ago, and his spirit hadn't declined at all. Even for an expert like the Great Sage, after spending thousands of years in one go, there would be side effects on the aging of his physical body and spirit. There was no doubt this array was definitely not as simple as the time array. The atmosphere in the Black Temple suddenly froze. After a long time, the Lord Go broke the silence. Bufong Boy, do you have more sweet and sour ribs? The Lord Go asked again, sticking out his tongue and looking at Bufong. Only when you're full will you have the energy to do something. Bufong looked at the fat on the Lord Go's body, and the corner of his mouth couldn't help but twitch. He took out the dragon meat and began to cook it. Soon, the aroma filled the entire Black Temple. A bowl of steaming, sparkling sweet and sour ribs was ready. He placed it on a blue and white porcelain plate and handed it to the Lord Go. The Lord Go's fat body shook as he gobbled up the food from the porcelain plate. The Great Sage Acheron seemed to feel something and sighed. He asked Bufong for 3 blue and white porcelain cups, took out his precious jade jar, and poured 3 cups of wine. The refreshing aroma of wine filled the Black Temple. People who smelled it couldn't help but salivate. Come, since you've chosen to embark on that path, I'll use my precious wine to help you succeed. The Great Sage Acheron placed a cup of wine in front of the Lord Go, who was gobbling up the food from the porcelain plate, and said with a smile. He also gave Bu Fong a cup of wine. The colorful wine swirled in the cup, and the aroma of the top-grade Acheron's helplessness seemed to be drifting tens of thousands of miles away. This cup of wine was incomparably mellow. The Lord Go raised his head. His nose seemed to be stained with the juice of the sweet and sour ribs, and the fur around the corners of his mouth was sticky with the juice. The Lord Go sucked, and the wine in the cup went into his mouth. Good wine. The Lord Go grinned, licked his tongue, and gobbled up the food from the porcelain plate again. The cups and plates were a mess. The sweet and sour ribs were finished, and so was the wine. The Lord Go burped and lay on the ground, not wanting to move at all. After resting for a while, the Lord Go turned over and stood up. You too, follow me, the Lord Go said. Then he strode forward with his enchanting cat-like steps. Before long, he turned left and right in the Black Temple and came to a different place. It was a secret chamber in the Black Temple. This secret chamber was very secretive, and only a few people in the Black Temple knew about it. Black Demon's death was indeed a grievance. Otherwise, he would have chosen a fight before he died. Bu Fong and the great sage Acheron followed the fat dog, who was twisting his buttocks and walking cat-like steps. They stepped into the secret chamber. Within the secret chamber, there was a universe, as if it was a brand new world. There were mountains, water, and a gentle breeze and drizzle. The water in the river was weak, but that was all. There was no vitality here. In the middle of this world, there was a complicated and mysterious array. Look, that's the array Lord Dog mentioned. Lord Dog has been lying in there for 1,000 years. I haven't eaten sweet and sour ribs for thousands of years. Lord Dog is craving it. The Lord Go really wants to eat it, the Lord Go said. He was still a little scared. He was really afraid that if he stayed here for tens of thousands of years without eating sweet and sour ribs, he would go crazy. Bu Fong's eyes narrowed as he looked at the huge array. He was a little shocked. The array rotated, emitting a mysterious aura. It was completely detached from this world, as if it didn't belong to this world at all. The great sage Acheron was stunned. This kind of array was completely beyond his imagination. It was like a miracle left by a god. An array that can control time. This is really a magical item. The great sage Acheron couldn't help but stretch out his hand, a little amazed. Bu Fong sensed the array and could clearly feel the aura of the time array contained in it. It was like the array engraved on the food box when he obtained it. The aura was the same. The difference was that the array in front of him was not just a time array. There were many different arrays in it. Bu Fong had never sensed this array before. It should be the remaining array of the gourmet array. However, the combination of the gourmet array could produce such an amazing effect. Bu Fong also felt something. His eyes lit up as if he could see through the entire array. In the array, Bu Fong saw several rotating dishes. The dishes were located in each corner of the array. Lord Go and the great sage Acheron couldn't see it, but Bu Fong could. The 4 dishes were sitting in the 4 corners of the array, flashing and converging as if they had turned into the 4 divine beasts. Dragon, phoenix, turtle, tiger. The 4 divine beasts sat at the 4 corners of the array, maintaining its natural operation. This was the 4 divisions array. Bu Fong withdrew his gaze, shocked. Bu Fong was getting more and more curious about the origin of the previous host. The spirit sea in his mind had condensed into the 4 divisions and 2 extreme spirit sea when he was cooking the dishes in the God of Cooking's menu. Bu Fong thought it was his own creation, but he didn't expect that the previous host had also developed this method. He exhaled softly. Bu Fong shook some thoughts out his head. What's the point of thinking so much? I'll deal with it when it comes. After all, I'm just a chef, and what I need to do is cook good dishes. All the battles and maintenance are for the sake of cooking better. All right, Lord Go is going in. Bu Fong boy, guard the place for Lord Go. Otherwise, Lord Go, I won't be able to eat sweet and sour ribs anymore. Lord Dog said with a smile that wasn't a smile as he swayed his butt and strode like a cat. His gentle and magnetic voice resounded in the void. Then, Lord Dog strutted his cat-like steps, slowly walking toward the center of the array. As soon as he entered the array, the magic array was instantly triggered, and it was activated. Rumble. The light of the time array flickered. The 4 dishes that represented the 4 divisions were the array's sustenance. Bufong stood outside the array with his hands clasped behind his back. His eyes were deep as he looked at the scene. The great sage Acheron hugged the jade jar and took a deep breath. Rumble. A moment later, the array rumbled. Dazzling light flowed through it. In the blink of an eye, Lord Go's aura completely disappeared. Bufong and the great sage Acheron exchanged a glance and said nothing. Then, they slowly walked out of the secret chamber. A rumble rang out. The door of the secret chamber was closed. Meanwhile, Bufong and the great sage Acheron came to the palace. They sat cross-legged on the ground. Lord Go naturally had his reasons for asking them to guard the array. In Nether Prison, in the D-Ting clan's territory, a terrible black vortex kept spinning, and a vast amount of energy was rapidly gathering into it. At the edge of the vortex, there were 2 figures standing on the other side. One of them was a thin old man with a sharp look in his eyes that seemed to cut through everything. He was Nether Puppeteer Patriarch. Standing beside Nether Puppeteer Patriarch was Sword Demon Patriarch. Both of them looked at the vortex and felt the terrifying energy within it. Both of them gasped. That realm is indeed supreme. How enviable. Nether Puppeteer Patriarch said. Sword Demon Patriarch carried a sword on his back, but he didn't say a word. Even if he did, he didn't know what to say. That realm was too far away from him. He only knew that it was a supreme realm. Of course, although it was far away from him, he was well aware of how terrifying that realm was. He could still remember that figure that was like a fiend god during the destruction of the previous era. He was fighting a supreme existence from a great world alone. That kind of power could destroy the heavens and extinguish the earth. Unfortunately, that person died in the end. Nether Puppeteer Patriarch flicked a finger on Sword Demon Patriarch's head, bringing him back to his senses. Stop daydreaming. In the battlefield of the stars, I fought with that hell dog. That dog has already stepped into this realm. You should have borrowed some methods from the forbidden areas of hell. Nether Puppeteer Patriarch said, just like how we borrowed the means of the Nether Prison, Forbidden Land. Sword Demon Patriarch nodded. However, we can't let him succeed. In the Netherworld, we only need D-Ting to step into that realm. Nether Puppeteer Patriarch said. His eyes were cold as he stared at the black vortex with a fanatical look in his eyes. Then, he glanced at Sword Demon Patriarch, with a thought in his mind. Immediately, an old gourd appeared in his hand. Take this gourd and go to Earth Prison. You must stop that dog from breaking through. Don't worry. With this gourd, the wine in it is enough to make you stronger than the tyrant body. But remember, don't drink too much. In addition, I'll send you a helper, and he will surprise them. The corner of Nether Puppeteer Patriarch's mouth twitched, and a cold smile emerged on his face. Sword Demon Patriarch grabbed the gourd, his eyes filled with excitement. He naturally knew what the wine in it was. Go! Nether Puppeteer Patriarch waved his hand. Sword Demon Patriarch nodded. With a thought, a silver stream of light emerged. Stepping on the sword, he disappeared in a flash. With his hands clasped behind his back, Nether Puppeteer Patriarch looked at the endless black vortex and sighed softly. Soon, very soon, Buzz, the void behind Nether Puppeteer Patriarch, was torn apart. A tall and sturdy figure wrapped in black gas appeared. I've painstakingly pieced you together. You are my proudest masterpiece. It's time for you to let the world know of your existence. Go! Nether Puppeteer Patriarch clasped his hands behind his back and never looked back. The eyes of the figure shrouded in black smoke immediately turned red. The next moment, the void healed, and the figure fled with a rumbling sound. Chapter 1345. Hell, Acheron City. In the early morning of the next day, the air was moist and fresh after the rain. The sunlight shone on the sparkling and translucent leaves on the leaves, and they emitted a myriad of resplendent rays of light. It looked quite dazzling and eye-catching. Acheron's little restaurant. There was a long line at the entrance. These people were from aristocratic families. They had moved from their respective cities to this place so that they could line up and buy the fortune flatbreads in the restaurant as soon as possible. Of course, they had come for the fortune flatbreads at first, but after a while, they were attracted by the delicacies in the restaurant. Therefore, they queued up for the sake of being able to eat delicious dishes. The economy of Acheron City had soared because of a small restaurant. As if they had a tacit understanding, the bustling stalls at night wouldn't open their stalls during the day because they knew that the daytime belonged to that restaurant. But today, the line was a little noisy. Usually, the restaurant would be open at this time. The restaurant had rested for a whole day yesterday, but today, it still hadn't opened. This made many people feel a little strange. The sounds of discussion resounded endlessly. Some guessed that Ownerbu had slept late. Some guessed that Ownerbu had gone on a long trip. But no matter how they guessed, the restaurant still didn't open. Some people couldn't wait any longer. They turned and left the line that had been waiting for a long time. However, not long after they left, the restaurant's doors were opened. Everyone's spirits rose, and they looked over. A graceful figure was standing in front of the door. Yu's black hair hung down, and her long eyelashes trembled slightly. "There's no need to wait. We're closed today," Yu said. A series of sighs resounded. The diners in the line all felt a little regretful and unwilling. They thought it was Ownerbu who had opened the door, but they didn't expect to hear such a message after waiting for so long. Nethery was cold, and her words were concise and comprehensive. After saying what needed to be said, she closed the restaurant's doors. She also furrowed her brows, feeling a little puzzled. Where did Bufong go? The Black Temple, a majestic palace, sat in the middle of the mountains. The Black Palace was extremely dilapidated, as if it had been silent for tens of thousands of years. In fact, the Black Temple had only been dilapidated for less than half a month. The reason why it was so dilapidated was largely due to the influence of the laws. The power of laws was somewhat similar to a time array. However, it was much more profound than a time array, because the experts of the Black Temple had indeed lived here before this. But because the Lord of the Forbidden Lands had fallen, all the living beings in the Black Hall had been killed, and the Black Hall seemed to have been ruined for tens of thousands of years. It was as if those living beings had never lived in the Black Hall. This was the profundity of the power of the laws. It was as if those people had already fallen 10,000 years ago. Dust covered the ground. Bufong walked slowly with his hands clasped behind his back. Every time he stepped on the ground, dust would rise. The silent Black Temple was like a sleeping beast that had retracted its claws and fangs. Bufong wandered around the Black Temple for a while. He had a clear understanding of every corner of the Black Temple. The Black Temple was huge. 10,000 years ago, it was an unparalleled force. Although it had been destroyed, many things had been left behind. In some secret chambers, Bufong found some books on cultivation techniques. Of course, there were also some books that recorded the history of 10,000 years ago. Unfortunately, the history recorded in those books had disappeared after the destruction of the Black Temple. Even the information recorded by later generations had been erased by the power of the laws. So, in fact, there was nothing to gain. But there was a pleasant surprise. Bufong had found a kitchen in the Black Temple. The kitchen of the Black Temple was very large. There was a whole row of stoves in it. This kind of stove was relatively primitive. It was manually ventilated. In the wine cellar of the kitchen, Bufong found some good wine. He took out a jar of wine. He slapped the lid off. A strong aroma of wine immediately wafted out. The wine was not good, but because of the accumulation of time, its quality had been greatly improved. The wine should have been finished a long time ago. However, because of the power of the laws, everything had returned to the second before the Black Temple became a forbidden land 10,000 years ago. Gulp. Bufong poured a glass of wine. The wine was transparent, and it tasted rather sweet. As soon as he took a sip, it was extremely spicy, but with a strong aroma of wine, which made him feel comfortable all over. Compared with the top-grade Acheron helplessness, this wine was nothing. But in fact, it was a good wine. It was mainly because of the accumulation of time. Some wines were mellower and more delicious the longer they existed. He took all the wine away. Before long, Bufong came to the Great Hall. In the Great Hall, Great Sage Acheron was curled up on a recliner, holding his jade jar and playing with it happily. When he saw Bufong, his eyes widened. "Where did you find so much wine?" Great Sage Acheron sucked in a breath of cold air. Looking at Bufong, who seemed to have moved an entire wine cellar over, he was instantly amazed. In fact, Bufong had indeed emptied an entire wine cellar. "Want a jar?" Bufong glanced at Great Sage Acheron and threw him a jar of wine. Great Sage Acheron took the wine and snorted, not caring at all. "How can this ordinary wine compare to my little green?" Bufong did not bother to pay attention to him. He took out the white tiger heaven stove. With wine, he naturally needed dishes to go with it. Bufong had some experience in making dishes that went with wine. Swish! He lit the stove and poured water into the pot. He let the water in the pot boil slowly. On the other side, Bufong began to prepare the ingredients. He had exchanged for some chicken feet from his system. These chicken feet were not big, around medium size. If they were too big, it would be difficult to absorb the flavor. If they were too small, it would be boring chew. This kind of medium chicken feet was just right. The dragon bone kitchen knife spun in his hand, and a dazzling golden light seemed to shoot out, dazzling and eye-catching. Clatter, clatter, clatter. Bufong's knife speed was extremely fast, reaching a level of familiarity. It should be the so-called practice makes perfect. The knife light flashed, and each of the sharp claws was cut off. Then, he poured them into a wooden basin and began to wash them. This cleaning process was also very skillful. He poured spirit vinegar into the water, and a sour smell filled the air. Great Sage Acheron couldn't help but twitch his nose. Then, Bufong began to rub and wash these chicken feet. These chicken feet were the claws of a high-grade spirit beast. After being soaked in spirit vinegar and washed, as well as being rubbed by Bufong, some of the impurities on them would be eliminated, and they would have the effect of removing the bones. After blanching, they were all drained and placed flat, waiting to be braised. After that, what Bufong needed to do next was to make the braised soup. The braised soup was the essence of this dish, and it was also the most important part of this dish. He cut off a big piece of rhino meat. Speaking of this piece of meat, there was something special about it. This was something that Great Sage Acheron had picked up in the battlefield of the stars. Brewing a braised soup was also a rather unique skill. First, he had to prepare the broth, which was made of rhino meat. After the broth was the medicinal broth. The medicinal broth was made of 18 kinds of precious spirit herbs, which gave the broth a golden brown color. To make the braised soup, first, he had to prepare the broth, pour the medicinal broth into it, and put the rhino meat into the broth to condense the oil. Next, he had to make the fragrance. To Bufong, it was a piece of cake to control the fragrance. He had a good understanding of spices, so after adding the spices, he added the exploding flame pepper, sun mother ginger, and so on. Soon, the braised soup was ready. Rumble, the steaming stew was boiling, and the aroma was constantly surging. It was a kind of medicinal fragrance which was very tempting. She looked at the gurgling stew. After that, Bufong poured the processed chicken feet into the bowl. It turned from a big fire to a small one, mainly because when the fire boiled, the skin of the chicken feet would burst, which would affect the beauty and taste. Controlling the temperature was also a skill. Next, during the braising process, Bufong took out all kinds of ingredients and added them. Star anise spirit, sun mother ginger, flame pepper, and so on, they were all added to boil. There were also some spices and so on. As it boiled, the soup became viscous, and the chicken feet rolled around in it. The originally white chicken feet slowly turned into a brown color after being boiled. They looked quite appetizing. They seemed to be covered with a layer of sugar juice, overflowing with light and color. Rumble, the broth was drained. Bufong took all the chicken feet out of the pot, placing them on a blue and white porcelain plate. The chicken feet were stacked together, exuding a strong aroma. The The skin and flesh of the chicken feet were full of elasticity, looking quite bright. The great sage Acheron was stunned. Smelling the aroma, he felt a pang of hunger in his stomach. Those claws. Looking at them, his mouth couldn't help but twitch. Buffon, my little friend, what is this dish? Is this the dish that goes well with wine you mentioned? The great sage Acheron wiped his mouth. He couldn't wait any longer. It was chicken feet cooked with the broth of rhinoceros meat. That piece of rhinoceros meat was the meat of the 9 Revolution great sage. It was definitely extraordinary. This kind of delicacy, just thinking about it, made people excited. Buffon sat on a chair. Opening the lid of a jar of wine, he glanced at the great sage Acheron, the corners of his mouth twitching. Buffon didn't say anything. He grabbed a chicken foot and bit it. The elastic chicken foot entered his mouth with a crunch. The bones of the chicken feet weren't very hard, so they were broken with a single bite. The tendons of the chicken feet were connected to the bones, so it was very chewy when he took it off. After a piece of chicken foot entered his stomach, he took a big gulp of wine. The mellow wine and the delicious chicken feet made him the envy of others. This chicken foot is called Hong Se chicken feet. Chicken feet and wine are a perfect match, Buffon said. Then he continued to eat the chicken feet and drink the wine. The great sage Acheron couldn't wait any longer. He grabbed a chicken foot and started to chew. He didn't even need to spit out the bones. With a crunch, he chewed and swallowed the bones. Then he took a big gulp of wine and clicked his tongue. It was refreshing to watch. The two of them held the jar of wine surrounding the chicken feet and began to eat. The ground was covered with chicken bones and empty wine jars. If the Lord Go knew that the two of them were living a happy life, he was afraid that he would suffer a cultivation deviation in the next second. He called you here to protect me, not to let you go camping. Of course, at this moment, the Lord Go didn't know that. And Buffon and the others didn't have that kind of awareness either. Crunch, gulp, gulp. The sound of people crunching chicken bones and drinking wine echoed in the silent hall. From time to time, the great sage Acheron would burp. The earth-prisoned sky was suddenly torn apart. A silver sword light whizzed past, disappearing in the blink of an eye. Rumble. A terrifying pressure spread out. Then it hovered in the sky. On the silver sword light, a gray-robed old man stood with his hands clasped behind his back. There was a bottle gourd hanging from the old man's waist. The bottle gourd looked old and worn. However, this gourd was the source of his confidence. Tyrant Patriarch was killed by Buffon. How could he continue to court death ignorantly? Without this gourd, unless Nether Puppeteer Patriarch did it himself, he wouldn't come to court death again. But with this gourd, things were different. This gourd was left behind by that man. Buzz. As it sped, soon, Sword Demon Patriarch saw the majestic Black Temple. There seemed to be an invisible vortex spinning above the Black Temple. Nether Puppeteer was right. That dog is really breaking through. Sword Demon Patriarch narrowed his eyes. The next moment, he hovered in midair, his eyes narrowed. Passing through the halls, he looked straight at Buffon and the great sage Acheron, who were drinking wine and eating chicken feet. Oh, sure enough, someone is guarding them. When Sword Demon saw Buffon and thought of Tyrant Patriarch, who was killed by Buffon, he couldn't help but shudder. Then he grabbed the gourd and shook it. The sound of juices colliding rang out. Holding the gourd, he removed the stopper. After removing the stopper of the gourd, a drop of crimson liquid immediately floated out of the gourd. I can finally drink the heaven-defying fortune wine. A hint of desire emerged in Sword Demon Patriarch's eyes. Then, with a flick of his finger, the crimson liquid slipped into his mouth. A rich aroma exploded in an instant. Rumble. A terrible aura spread in the sky. Buffon and the great sage Acheron, who were drinking wine and eating chicken feet, froze and looked up at the sky. Their eyes fell on Sword Demon Patriarch, who was stepping on a sword light. Chapter 1346. Sword Demon Patriarch. Bufong and Acheron Great Sage froze when they saw the figure in the sky, stepping on a sword. A half-bitten chicken claw was stuffed in Acheron Great Sage's mouth, and 3 of the chicken claws were still exposed, twitching as Acheron Great Sage moved his mouth. "He's here so soon?" Great Sage Acheron said in surprise. Obviously, he didn't expect Sword Demon Patriarch to come so fast. He didn't expect Nether Prison to move so fast. Of course, what was even more surprising was that it was just Sword Demon Patriarch. Even Tyrant Patriarch was killed. So how could a mere Sword Demon Patriarch stop them? Great Sage Acheron and Bufong exchanged a glance and saw the surprise in each other's eyes. Rumble. In the sky, Sword Demon Patriarch's aura suddenly exploded after drinking a drop of crimson wine. The blood in his body seemed to be boiling. The heaven-defying fortune wine was that man's masterpiece. A drop of it could steal the fortune of heaven and earth. It could elevate his cultivation base to a very terrifying level. But as soon as the drop of wine entered his stomach, Sword Demon Patriarch's body seemed to swell. He flicked his finger. Suddenly, a beam of sword light shot toward the Black Temple below like it was flying. He wanted to destroy the Black Temple. A terrifying speed swept across heaven and earth, filling the air with a deafening sonic boom. The sound of the sonic boom made everyone's scalp go numb. Crack! Great Sage Acheron bit the chicken claw in half. Then, he took a step and soared into the sky. "Bufong, my little friend, leave me a few chicken claws. I'll be back soon." Great Sage Acheron burst out laughing. Then he sped up into the sky. His face froze when he saw Sword Demon Patriarch shoot out a sword light with a flick of his finger. Great Sage Acheron's body was surrounded by the water of Acheron. He chewed on a chicken claw. Boom! The water of Acheron seemed to have turned into a waterfall that flowed in reverse and collided with the sword light, resulting in an earth-shattering explosion. Rumbling sounds rang out incessantly. Voila! The sword light kept slicing and actually managed to cut the water of Acheron into 2. How is this possible? Great Sage Acheron was slightly taken aback by the power of Sword Demon Patriarch's sword. He knew very well that Sword Demon Patriarch was much weaker than Tyrant Patriarch. It should be impossible for him to destroy his water of Acheron with a single strike. However, he was extremely puzzled by the scene that had just unfolded. Something was wrong. However, it was impossible for the Great Sage Acheron to lose just like that. After all, he was an old man who had lived for tens of thousands of years. Boom! He reached out a palm, and the water in his palm turned into a whirlpool that sucked in the sword light. The strangling force of the sword was completely neutralized by the whirlpool. Then he clenched his fist. A crack rang out. The sword energy was crushed in an instant. Great Sage Acheron grinned. With a few crunches, the chicken feet in his mouth were completely crushed into powder. In the sky, looking at Great Sage Acheron, Sword Demon Patriarch grinned. He carefully stuffed the broken gourd back into his hand, then put it away. Then he turned to Bufong. His eyes suddenly turned sharp. The silver sword light around his feet shone brightly in an instant, and it grew larger and larger. Boom! The void seemed to crack under the impact. In a flash, Sword Demon Patriarch appeared in front of Great Sage Acheron. He raised his hand and waved it. Endless sword light, wrapped in power, poured down toward Great Sage Acheron. Great Sage Acheron was taken aback. With a thought, the water turned into a water prison around him. Boom! 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 The sword chi smashed onto the water prison, as if it was going to break it. Great Sage Acheron took a few steps back in the sky. "How can you be so strong?" Great Sage Acheron said incredulously as he looked at Sword Demon Patriarch, who was surrounded by endless sword light. In the past, Sword Demon Patriarch was a little weaker than Great Sage Acheron, but now he seemed to have reached the level of the Great Sage who had perfected the Tyrant body. Every move and skill seemed to contain infinite power. As it poured down, it seemed as if it wanted to blast people into dregs. So, this is the feeling of power Sword Demon Patriarch was extremely excited. He raised his hand and felt the energy flowing through his body. The energy had made him reach a level that he had never imagined before. He clenched his fist. Immediately, endless sword light swirled around him. His sword intent and sword chi had both been strengthened. This was the effect of the heaven-defying fortune wine. One drop of the wine had made him step into the great sage realm, and he could now unleash an incomparably powerful sword light. Although he was strong in the past, he was only a 9-revolution great sage. But now he seemed to have made a qualitative leap. He could hardly suppress the excitement on his face. Sword Demon Patriarch looked at great sage Acheron and pinched his fingers together. The next moment, a sword light shot out like a thunderbolt. Boom! Great sage Acheron was only a few centimeters away from Acheron. The sword light tore through the air and cut off a few hairs of great sage Acheron. Why is he so violent? Great sage Acheron glared at Sword Demon Patriarch. He was infuriated. In the Black Temple, Bu Fong sat in a chair, munching on a chicken claw in his hand as he watched the battle in the sky. It was a little strange that Sword Demon Patriarch was suppressing Great Sage Acheron with his explosive strength. Looking at Great Sage Acheron, Bu Fong kept retreating, feeling wronged. Even Bu Fong couldn't stand it anymore. Big Yellow, have some biscuits. Bu Fong took a sip of wine and called out, "Biscuits." Great Sage Acheron glared at Bu Fong. When he thought that he would become bald again after eating the biscuits, he quickly shook his head and refused. "It's impossible for me to eat biscuits. Not in this lifetime." Great Sage Acheron was very determined. Bu Fong helplessly shrugged his shoulders when he saw his resolute expression. Boom! Thousands of swords gathered and turned into a sword light that seemed capable of cutting heaven and earth. The sword light fell with a rumble, shattering everything in its path. Even the void began to crumble under its might. The returning sword. Sword Demon Patriarch burst out laughing. Looking at Great Sage Acheron, who was being crushed by him, he felt very happy. The fluctuations of the battle spread in an instant. It was a battle between a 9-revolution Great Sage and a Great Sage of the Great Sage realm. Naturally, the fluctuations were extraordinary. In Earth Prison, many experts sensed the fluctuations. Then, many experts rushed toward the location where the fluctuations of the battle occurred. Many people sucked in a cold breath. The 9-revolution Great Sage didn't fight in the battlefield of the stars, but chose to fight on the ground. Did he not care about the rules? Hades-era's hair fluttered in the wind, and the front of his robe was unbuttoned. His eyes narrowed. He looked in the direction of the Black Temple. With a stomp of his foot, he turned into a beam of light and shot into the sky, flying toward the old site of the Black Temple. Only Sword Demon Patriarch of Nether Prison could have such a mighty sword energy. How dare he act so presumptuously in Earth Prison? Not only Hades-era, but Ing Long, Earth Prison Overlord, and other experts also sped toward the Black Temple. In the cave of the fallen gods, a blood-colored, ghostly fire was burning. The golden skeleton let out a sigh, then fell silent again. The fluctuations of the battle continued to break out. The experts who were closer to the old site of the Black Temple arrived in no time. When they arrived and saw the scene in the sky, they all sucked in cold breaths in disbelief. Great Sage Acheron was being suppressed by Sword Demon Patriarch. In the sky, Great Sage Acheron's body was covered with sword marks, and blood was seeping out of them. When did Sword Demon Patriarch become so strong? Boom! A figure fell from the sky at high speed. With a loud rumble, he smashed into the ground, causing the whole ground to cave in. The ground caved in deeply, and cracks spread out densely. The black hole trembled several times because of the rumble. I don't want to waste my time with you. Next, I'll finish you with one move. Sword Demon Patriarch slowly unsheathed the sword on his back. It was an azure blue sword, and he looked at it. But with just a gentle wave of the sword, a deafening sword cry resounded. Swoosh! In the soil, Great Sage Acheron climbed out of it. He looked a little embarrassed at the moment. Sword Demon Patriarch was high and mighty, and he no longer took great sage Acheron seriously. I'll kill you with one move. 10,000 swords returned to origin. Sword Demon Patriarch shouted. The next moment, the sword in his hand slashed down toward great sage Acheron. Boom, boom, boom. One sword beam after another shot out of the sword in Sword Demon Patriarch's hand, turning into thousands upon thousands of sword beams. They fell from the sky. You forced me to do this. Great sage Acheron flew into a rage. Being looked down upon made him even more furious. Sword Demon Patriarch, whom he had suppressed many years ago, wanted to kill him. It seemed that he was going to force him to use his ultimate move. Crack! The steaming fortune flatbread appeared in his hand, and he bit hard. Immediately, the fortune gas in the flatbread surged into great sage Acheron's body. Buzz in the sky. The gourd on Sword Demon Patriarch's waist trembled slightly the moment the fortune flatbread appeared. It was as if they sensed each other. Buzz, as soon as the flatbread entered his stomach, great sage Acheron felt a fortune explode inside him. He opened his mouth, and his nostrils flared. Then he spat out a fireball as if hinting at something. A gust of wind blew past. Great sage Acheron's clothes fluttered in the wind. On top of his head, strands of hair began to fall off, fluttering in the wind. Before long, great sage Acheron's bald head was the only thing left. Great sage Acheron touched his bald head with a deep look in his eyes. He looked at the countless swords that were slashing down from the sky. Then he slowly raised his fist and threw out a punch. Boom, boom, boom. One beam of sword energy after another slashed down unscrupulously, swallowing great sage Acheron in an instant. The Black Temple shook violently. The corner of Bu Fong's mouth twitched. Didn't you say you would never eat flatbread in your life? Where's your integrity? Bu Fong took a sip of wine. Sword Demon Patriarch stood calmly in the sky with his sword in hand. At this moment, he felt like a banished immortal. Suddenly, the ground exploded. Yellow Spring Great Sage, who was engulfed by the sword energy of his myriad returning to origin swords, rushed up in a flash. Explosions rang out. Rumbling filled the air. Great Sage Acheron strode up and threw a punch at Sword Demon Patriarch's head. Boom! A sword and a fist collided together. Both of them took a few steps back in midair. They were evenly matched. The bald Great Sage Acheron was so strong. The surrounding spectators were all dumbfounded. The number of spectators this time was much more than the number of spectators in the previous Star Battlefield. After all, there were too many restrictions in the battlefield. This time, everyone in Earth Prison would know that Great Sage Acheron was bald. You're courting death. The sword in Sword Demon Patriarch's hand slashed out beams of light, each of which was extremely sharp. The sky seemed to have turned into a dense sea of sword energy. Great Sage Acheron, on the other hand, kept swinging his fists. Punch after punch, he directly smashed the sword chi into pieces. The destructive power brought about by the battle between Great Sage and Nine Revolution was terrifying. The aftershock of their battle caused the ground to crumble completely. Bu Fong sat in the Black Temple. His hair had turned grayish-green at some point, and he was yawning with tears in his eyes. Beams of green light spread in all directions. The entire Black Temple was shrouded in them. It was as if they were worth 1,000 taels of gold. In the sky, the aftershock of the battle between Sword Demon Patriarch and Great Sage Acheron fell in front of the Black Temple, dispelled, and smashed into the ground around it. The ground around the Black Temple seemed to have been cut, leaving deep ravines. Great Sage Acheron, on the other hand, was standing against the sword light. Finally, he came in front of Sword Demon Patriarch. He stared at Sword Demon Patriarch, his bald head gleaming. You forced me to eat flatbread and made me bald. You're very strong, aren't you? Great Sage Acheron glared at him. The next moment, he threw a punch at Sword Demon Patriarch's face. Oh! Sword Demon Patriarch was knocked flying backward for thousands of miles in the sky. He did not seem to stop flying. But finally, a rumble rang out. The void was torn apart. A figure shrouded in black smoke walked out of it. He raised a hand and stopped Sword Demon Patriarch from flying backward. As soon as the figure appeared, heaven and earth fell silent. Chapter 1347. Rumble. His oppressive figure soared through the sky, accompanied by a series of sonic booms. Great Sage Acheron's punch was so powerful that it smashed into Sword Demon Patriarch's face and sent him flying backward. Everyone looked up and cheered excitedly when they saw Sword Demon Patriarch streaking across the sky like a shooting star. However, their cheers soon came to an abrupt halt, because a silhouette stepped out of thin air, surrounded by a majestic black aura. As the black smoke spread, a palm reached out and pressed against Sword Demon Patriarch's body, stopping him from flying backward. Sword Demon Patriarch was a little confused and a little angry. He was a sword cultivator, and although his offense was strong, his physical defense was much weaker. He didn't expect that Great Sage Acheron would be able to get so close to him and punch him in the face. If it weren't for the person behind him, he would have been sent flying even further away. The power of the punch was terrifying. Is this the bald Great Sage Acheron? He had seen Great Sage Acheron's terror before, but now he felt even more terrified. Is that flatbread really so magical? No, impossible. How can a mere flatbread compare to the heaven-defying fortune wine? Sword Demon Patriarch seemed to be a little angry out of humiliation. He let out a low growl. With a thought, the gourd hanging on his waist shot up into the sky. Wine seemed to be churning inside the gourd, and it kept churning like a raging wave. A popping sound rang out. The gourd stopper was pulled open, and a slender stream of crimson wine slithered out like a small snake. It was about to enter Sword Demon Patriarch's mouth. Gulp! Gulp! Sword Demon Patriarch drank the wine greedily. He felt as if a ferocious beast was roaring and boiling inside him. He couldn't control his emotions anymore. Suddenly, the gourd was grabbed by a hand, and the black aura dissipated, revealing the appearance of the hand. It was a palm made of pitch-black metal. The joints between the fingers were made with very fine parts. Looking at that palm, Sword Demon Patriarch's pupils constricted. Let go! Sword Demon Patriarch let out a low growl. With his body as the center, a streak of sword light streaked across the air and slashed at the metal palm. He wanted to chop off that metal hand. However, in the face of Sword Demon Patriarch's attack, the Patriarch's eyes widened. The metallic hand simply grabbed the cork of the gourd and stuffed it back in. Ding ding! Sword Demon Patriarch's furious sword strike struck the palm, but it only caused sparks to fly in all directions. Dazzling sparks flew in all directions, stunning Sword Demon Patriarch. After the gourd was put away, his mind gradually calmed down. Hiss, hiss, hiss. Sword Demon Patriarch sucked in a cold breath and glanced at the gourd in horror. He had almost lost his mind just now. Although the heaven-defying fortune wine was powerful, its side effects were as terrible as ever. Once he drank too much and lost control of himself, he could easily fall into madness and suffer a cultivation deviation. Huff, huff, huff. Beads of sweat broke out on his forehead, and he took a deep breath, feeling a lingering fear. When he came back to his senses, he also felt as if his body was about to explode. After drinking too much of the heaven-defying fortune wine, the energy in his body was about to burst. However, his strength didn't improve much. Although the heaven-defying fortune wine was heaven-defying, it was already not bad that it could raise his cultivation base to the level of the Great Sage. If he wanted to reach a higher level, he couldn't just drink wine. That was why Sword Demon Patriarch's body had almost exploded, but it had no effect at all. If it wasn't for someone stopping him, his body would have already exploded from overeating. With that thought in mind, Sword Demon Patriarch couldn't help but look at the figure who had saved him. It was a majestic figure that carried with it a pressure that made his heart tremble. A terrible aura pervaded the air, suppressing him so much that he almost couldn't breathe. Sword Demon Patriarch's pupils constricted. Looking at the figure shrouded in black smoke, he couldn't help but widen his eyes. This should be the person Nether Puppeteer Patriarch said sent to help me. But why does this figure look so familiar? Sword Demon Patriarch narrowed his eyes. Suddenly, a rumbling sound rang out. The black smoke shrouding the figure dissipated in an instant. Gradually, the figure's appearance appeared in everyone's line of sight. The moment he appeared, everyone was dumbfounded. Everyone sucked in a cold breath, their faces filled with disbelief. Some of them even began to show signs of fear. They never thought that this person would appear in front of them. He was a man who should have died. Buzz, a clanging sound rang out incessantly. It was a burly figure with a huge body. Its body was incomparably huge, and it had a familiar face. However, it was extremely cold and emotionless. Countless pitch-black metal rods were stabbed into his body. Two thick cylindrical rods, made of an unknown material, had pierced through his chest from his back. It made him look ferocious. However, none of this was the focus of their attention. Even Sword Demon Patriarch was so frightened that he almost couldn't breathe. Hades Tenzang, Sword Demon Patriarch roared, his eyes filled with horror. Why the F***CK did Hades Tenzang show up again? Not only did he show up in the previous battle, but now he's here as well. Why is he still haunting us like a ghost? If it were Hades Tenzang, Sword Demon Patriarch wouldn't have the confidence to defeat him. After all, this man had left a deep shadow in his heart. Hades Tenzang? Sword Demon Patriarch's roar rang through the skies. Down below, everyone's eyes went wide as they stared incredulously at the figure hovering in the sky. Then, an uproar broke out. As the bald great sage Acheron stared at Hades Tenzang, his eyes went wide. Hades era. Is he King eating flatbread again? No, that's not right. Great sage Acheron's pupils constricted. He had sensed a terrible aura from Tiansong's body, and that was the reason why he was shocked. It was hostility. Who is Hades Tenzang? Said the figure shrouded in black smoke, glancing at Sword Demon Patriarch. His face was devoid of emotion, and if one looked closely, one could see fine cracks on his face. There was no doubt that his face had been forcibly stitched together by someone. No, you are not Hades Tenzang. You are Nether Puppeteer Patriarch's Nether Puppet. Suddenly, a look of excitement came into Sword Demon Patriarch's eyes, as if he had thought of something. He opened his mouth and let out an incredulous laugh. In the face of this fact, even he could not believe it. For so many years, Nether Puppeteer Patriarch had never shown this trump card of his. It was simply terrifying. A puppet made from Hades Tenzang's body? That was crazy. However, during the Great Battle, Hades Tenzang's body was completely blown up into countless pieces. Some of the pieces could not be found at all. It was rare that Nether Puppeteer Patriarch had the patience to piece them together bit by bit. I'm not Hades Tenzang. I'm a heavenly nether puppet. The puppet's eyes flashed as he said this. A heavenly nether puppet. Hiss! The conversation between Sword Demon Patriarch and the heavenly nether puppet rang in everyone's ears. When everyone heard this, they were extremely shocked. Someone had collected Hades Tenzang's body and made it into a puppet? Who was it that was so crazy? Hades Tenzang was an expert who had touched that level. How terrifying would a puppet made from his body be? The heavenly nether puppet did not waste time talking to Sword Demon Patriarch. He did not seem to like talking much. The metal hand grabbed the gourd and slowly put it into his stomach. There his stomach parted, revealing a space. He put the gourd into the space, and his stomach closed up again. The scene made everyone understand that this person was indeed not Hades Tenzang, but a heavenly nether puppet. This is too much. Great Sage Acheron also guessed the whole story. He was even more furious at Nether Puppeteer Patriarch. This behavior was utterly devoid of conscience. But suddenly, Great Sage Acheron shuddered. In the distance, the heaven nether puppet looked at him with an expressionless face, its eyes shining with a crimson light as it scanned his body. The next moment, a rumble rang out. The heavenly nether puppet appeared in front of him as if he had teleported. Target found. Obliterated. An emotionless, somewhat mechanical voice rang out. Then, the puppet threw a punch at Great Sage Acheron. Great Sage Acheron was furious. He did not dodge, but threw a punch as well, colliding with the heavenly nether puppet's punch. Looking at Hades Tenzang's face, Great Sage Acheron's anger surged. Boom! An earth-shattering explosion broke out in the void. Then, Great Sage Acheron was knocked flying away. He fell from the sky like a cannonball, turning into a shooting star and smashing hard on the ground. The ground exploded. It sank deeply. Waves of energy spread out and bombarded the jade-green barrier. Sitting in the black temple, gray-green-haired Bufong opened his mouth wide and yawned. With just one punch, the bald Great Sage Acheron was sent flying away. This kind of power was really frightening. In the sky, a clanging sound of metal rang out. The heavenly nether puppet raised his arm, aiming at the place where Great Sage Acheron was going to fall. Crack! Crack! Then a metal panel on his forearm opened up, revealing several nozzles on it. Boom! Beams of light shot out of the nozzles, blasting toward Great Sage Acheron. Wherever the scarlet ray passed, space would distort as if it was being incinerated. It was very terrifying. Great Sage Acheron naturally did not dare to take such a blow. He slapped the ground with both palms and shot out like a cannonball. He rushed out of the range of the beams. In the sky, the heavenly nether puppet's forearm spun. The nozzles were aimed at Great Sage Acheron. They swept all the way. The ground seemed to be cut in half in an instant. Rubble crumbled, and lava seemed to surge out of the ground. It was a terrifying scene. Sword Demon Patriarch, who was hovering in midair, shivered. Looking at the heavenly nether puppet, he sucked in a cold breath. Nether Puppeteer Patriarch is indeed a freak. I can't believe he used Hades Tenzang's corpse to imitate that man's guardian puppet to create such a fearsome existence. This heavenly nether puppet's attacking method is somewhat similar to that man's guardian puppet. Rumble. Great Sage Acheron kept running. He felt a sense of urgency as if his butt was on fire. Suddenly, he stomped the ground. His figure soared into the sky. He appeared in front of the heavenly nether puppet. His fists seemed to flash with golden light. Tian Song boy, I'm sorry. Great Sage Acheron bellowed. Then, he threw a punch at the puppet's head. A severe warning. His voice resounded through the heavens. Suddenly, Great Sage Acheron felt that time seemed to slow down. His punch suddenly became extremely slow. It moved like a snail toward the heavenly nether puppet's head. The heavenly nether puppet stood motionless. His eyes moved slowly and locked on the puppet's body. Great Sage Acheron was shocked. Rumble. A moment later, the heavenly nether puppet's fist smashed into Great Sage Acheron's face. Once again, the puppet was sent flying from the sky like a cannonball and smashed hard on the ground. His strength was terrifying. The ground was full of holes. It had long been turned into ruins. Only the Black Temple, which was guarded by Bufong, was unshaken. The heavenly nether puppet raised his arm. Another metal plate separated from his forearm. With a click, a nozzle appeared. Target locked. Obliterate. The puppet's cold and emotionless voice rang out. He was just like Hades Tenzang, who had dominated Nether Prison and Earth Prison in the past. All of a sudden stopped. At that moment, a shout shook heaven and earth. The sound of something tearing through the air came. A moment later, the heavenly nether puppet slowly raised his head. A black shadow was thrown from a distance, approaching in an instant. Rumble. The arm that had turned into a nozzle returned to its original shape. It lifted up and caught the black shadow. That black shadow was the Hades halberd. Hades' era tore through the air, staring at the heavenly nether puppet in the sky and that familiar face. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.